happen in our society.
Enough of anti-white prejudice. A promotion of the idea that white lives matter just as much as black lives.
Nigel Farage said today it should be white lives matter. Are you making the same point?
It should be everyone matters.
And when you hear Henry's faltering voice, losing its tone, losing its volume, as he...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Peter Cardwell with you here on Talk, in for Alex Phillips this weekend and back as usual tomorrow night at 7 o'clock on the Evening Exchange all week. Is Britain broken or just badly managed? That's the question we're asking this morning. There's so many different aspects of this. Police wanted to intervene in the Henry Novak murder trial and release a statement about disinformation. We have the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, this morning saying that he does not believe that there is two-tier policing in this country. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. The founder of Iceland has blasted exactly that, two-tier policing, after officers rushed to a store when a suspicious customer falsely accused staff of racism. Yet, of course, they are ignoring violent shoplifters. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about so many different aspects as well, including risky cuts to fund defence. 1%, half a billion quid, I should say, off the NHS. Is that a good idea? Sturgeon's husband as well, that rumbles on too. He sold a Portuguese villa after claiming legal aid. We'll talk about that. We'll talk to the Shadow Energy Secretary, Claire Coutinho, and the Home Affairs spokesman for Reform UK, Zia Youssef, will be on the programme too. We'll talk to Sir Liam Fox, the former Defence Secretary for the Conservatives, about those defence cuts and the fact that the entire fleet of UK attack submarines, unfit for war, stuck in the dock, and why middle-class white men have been banned from a public sector internship. So much to discuss. I want to know what you think. This is the show where you can get your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in. There's plenty of time for all of it. I can see the phones going already and the messages being sent in. Also, if you have anything you want me to ask Claire Coutinho, the Shadow Energy Secretary, or Zia Youssef from Reform, the Home Affairs spokesman for them, please text it in and I'll put as many callers and texters questions to those politicians as I can. I've got my own questions too, of course. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, you can send me a voice note, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss here on Talk between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us. Well, David Lammy isn't speaking to us this morning. We did ask him, but weirdly, he hasn't spoken to Talk at all since he became Deputy Prime Minister. In fact, I can't remember the last time David Lammy actually did an interview with Talk. I'm sure it's absolutely nothing to do with the hundreds of thousands of pounds a rival station has given him over the years. That wouldn't come into his thinking whatsoever. Only a cynic would say that. David Lammy has been talking to the BBC this morning, though, and Henry Novak's murder, he says, brought back memories of George Floyd.
Seeing that footage of Henry Novak at the end of his life was deeply, deeply traumatic. I thought of my own sons around the same age. It brought back memories of George Floyd, of Stephen Lawrence. It was so painful, so harrowing, so horrendous, and my heart goes out to that family for the grace and dignity with which they are now having to conduct their lives.
Apologies, that was Sky News rather than the BBC. I got that wrong. He was also asked by Sky News about Nigel Farage and what Nigel Farage has been saying this week. Nigel Farage criticised in Parliament as well for not explicitly condemning the violence in Southampton that led to 11 police officers being injured and a police dog as well. There were mainly peaceful protests there, but there was some violence as well. David Lammy had some thoughts on that.
Mr Farage, who's apparently now beyond the pale, for saying he didn't call for people to go and do things. He said that response that he would like to see is rage, not that different from righteous anger.
Let's qualify this. Nigel Farage was speaking into the protest and the despicable acts of criminal damage and violence directed at the police in Southampton. It was not a responsible thing to do.
It was interesting as well, the thoughts that J.D. Vance has had, the Vice President of the United States, this week on all of this. That's been pretty controversial too. David Lammy has spoken to him. The two men have a friendship. Let's see what David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, told Sky News about that.
I disagree with him. This has got nothing to do with mass migration. This young man was a Brit. Let's be clear about that. And I said, look, Mr. Vice President, you're wrong about this. And it's also the case that actually murder is coming down in the United Kingdom. So we had an agreeable conversation, but we disagreed.
But it sounds like you gave him a ticking off and told him to keep his nose out of our business.
We had an agreeable conversation because we have got a relationship, but I wanted to make him clear that I disagreed with some of the facts that he was asserting and to present the facts to him.
David Lammy speaking to Sky News. And Mr Lammy, if you or the people around you are watching, you're very welcome on this programme, on any of my programmes, at any stage, at any time that suits you. I'm on 5 nights a week from 7 till 10. If you want to come on any time, you're very, very welcome. It does seem odd that you ignore Talk and don't speak to us. And I'd love you to, I have many, many questions to ask you. And I would love to talk to you in the way that Sky News and the BBC did today. So Mr Lammy, if you're watching or people around you are watching, very, very welcome on my programmes anytime. And we'll do a fair but robust interview anytime you like. One person who certainly doesn't shy away from public comment is Peter Blexley, the former Metropolitan Police detective, who has some views on what is going on. We spoke yesterday, Peter, but I was keen to have you on today again, not just because you're the best crime commentator in Britain, but also because of this story in the Sunday Times about the police trying to intervene in the Novak trial. At a critical point in the murder case, the force wanted to release a statement about disinformation. Tell us your thoughts on that, and indeed what David Lammy has been saying this morning.
Well, thank you. This news about Hampshire police wanting to interfere during an ongoing criminal trial around a case of murder is absolutely staggering. The stupidity shown by whosoever even considered releasing a statement, drafted the statement, and then went to the CPS to check whether it was okay with them, clearly demonstrates that they have no understanding of policing, that they have no grip whatsoever on the machinations of the criminal justice system, and therefore they shouldn't be anywhere within policing. It is stupidity of a level which is absolutely off the stupidity Richter scale.
You and I both know, because we obey the law, that you've got to be really, really careful when there are active judicial proceedings. We had actually a very good question, very reasonable question from a caller, from a texter actually yesterday, saying, Peter, why have we not heard more about Henry Novak before? Because the murder happened in December, I believe. And I said, and the texter got back in touch and said, thanks for the explanation, that there are active legal proceedings. There are certain things we want to say, but we can't say. But if you have a police force putting out a statement about that disinformation when active proceedings are happening, surely that's going to prejudice that, or at least play into that in some way. And I just wonder, given that any first-year journalism student will tell you that you've got to be incredibly careful when judicial proceedings are active and happening in courts, why the police force didn't seem to know that that was something that they could prejudice and that they shouldn't have done. I mean, it's pretty basic, isn't it, Peter?
It is so basic. It is so fundamental. Police officers of very little service know this, understand this. Journalists like yourself, media commentators like me, know this and understand this. From the point that somebody is charged with a criminal offence until the disposal of that case, in other words, there is a conviction, there is an acquittal, there is the end of those criminal proceedings, you say nothing, absolutely nothing about the case whatsoever. That is why the contempt of court legislation exists, so that people that break those rules can be held to account and can, on occasion, fairly rarely, be locked up for it. The rules exist for a reason, and that reason is so that a court can hear the trial without any undue influence being brought to bear on any participant, particularly a jury. It's unbelievable. I use the word staggering again. I unashamedly use the word stupidity again, because whosoever had anything to do that has shown that they are fundamentally unfit to play any role of any description in policing whatsoever.
Peter, perhaps I could ask you about another story. This is about Iceland, the founder blasting two-tier policing. This is something that David Lammy says doesn't exist. He's told the BBC this morning that two-tier policing doesn't exist. This is officers rushing to a store when a suspicious customer falsely accused staff of racism. Yet, of course, when there is shoplifting, they're often, almost always, nowhere to be seen.
Yes, but let's drill down on some detail of this case, shall we? A black customer entered into the store and started removing the tops from milk bottles. Now, that is deeply, deeply alarming. Whether he was going to drink it, whether he was going to place something with it, in other words, a poison. People do poison foods and drinks from time to time. Whether he was going to throw it all over the shop floor by some way of a stupid protest, whatever. The Asian member of staff who very alertly spotted this and then responsibly chose to intervene, because of course he must, was then faced by an utterly unfounded, false, untrue allegation of racism by the black person. When the police were notified of this, they rushed to the store as though the crime of the century was being committed, when in fact, of course, no crime whatsoever was being committed, apart from the tampering with the milk, by the black man. An utterly false allegation. But of course, when the police, with their DEI nonsense training and their slavish obedience to a race action plan, hear any allegation of racism, they think we must attend immediately. And that's exactly what they did when this store and so many others in its chain cannot get the police to attend when they are trying to tackle violent shoplifters. That's your police's priorities. That's the principles by which they currently abide by, and it is absolutely fundamentally wrong.
Peter, just before you go, the Metropolitan Police saying they will not investigate the harassment of Dame Helen Mirren, national treasure, who was harassed for her pro-Israel views. She was called horrible names. We've all seen that clip, and we talked about it at the time. A pro-Palestinian activist who called her a Zionist B-word. What do you make of the fact the police are saying they will not investigate?
Well, I suspect they will say that there might not be sufficient evidence to reach the threshold of a public order offence, for example. And let's remember, we are still allowed in this country to offend people. I think shouting abuse like that is utterly acceptable. But on this matter, I concur entirely with the brilliance of Dame Helen Mirren's husband, who used some rather fruity language when he told that idiot, in no uncertain terms, but with slighter choice of words, to go away.
Yes, absolutely. Peter, in as lovely a way as I can, I will now tell you to go away because we finished the interview, but I really appreciate your contribution this morning. And just a reminder that Peter has a brilliant stage show, which I've seen recently. It's called The Undercover Detective, The Makings of a Murderer. I saw it in Belfast a couple of weeks ago. Absolutely brilliant. He's about halfway through the tour, and you can get tickets for that. He hasn't asked me to advertise it. I'm just telling you because it's really, really good. And I think he's up in Scotland over the next few days. Worth having a look at his website, seeing where he is. Matthew is in Warrington and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Matthew, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say this morning?
Good morning. It's a lovely Sunday morning, it is as well. Yeah, Peter, for me, Lammy doesn't know his backside from his elbow. He's completely gaslighting what's gone on.
There's no, but Matthew, there's no two-tier policing in this country because the Deputy Prime Minister says it. The Deputy Prime Minister says it, so it must be true, Matthew.
Well, he doesn't know what Red Leicester is neither, does he? Let's be honest about it.
Matthew, just I got the reference, but just for people who perhaps don't, that's a brilliant, timely reference to his David Lammy's appearance on Mastermind, which is still on YouTube, is all I would say. But Matthew, I mean, the question we're asking this morning is Britain broken or just badly managed? Maybe it's both. What do you think?
It's absolutely in tatters. And I put a lot of the start of that down to when Blair was in power, when we did the Northern Ireland Peace Agreement, when we watered down so many laws to accommodate the IRA and the royalist terrorists, and removing of the Crown of the police force, watering down of the Northern Ireland...
So you think it can be traced back to that, Matthew?
Oh, yeah, because they've implemented things there to accommodate the Republicans.
Well, wasn't that necessary to bring peace to Northern Ireland, many would say?
Yeah, I served in Northern. I did 2 years in Ballykelly. I served in all the provinces in Northern Ireland. I did 2 years of my life there. And so I do understand the problems, because I think if you live in England, you don't realise what Northern Ireland's like. Yeah.
Ballykelly, a very tough place to be for a couple of years. And thank you for your service. It was people like you who kept me safe growing up.
Well, yeah, but a lot of people did a lot of things over there, good and bad, but it was watered down to accommodate. And you look at the comeback now. You've got British soldiers being prosecuted for crimes that have been registered, but the royalists and Republican terrorists are not being prosecuted. Yeah. When they did prosecute them, they all got a white chick off Tony Blair.
Well, listen, there's lots on that. We'll continue to debate that very, very important issue. And Matthew, you might be interested to hear a little bit later on. We're going to be speaking to Debbie from the Forces Equine Games. This is the National Equestrian Championships for those who serve our country. It's a brilliant idea, and it's done really, really well. It's helped an awful lot of people. Debbie's a regular contributor to this country, and it's UK public servants, serving personnel, veterans and their dependents, along with friends and family of the emergency services, armed forces and government as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the programme too. But Matthew, thanks for your contribution. Really appreciate it. Karen has also sent me a voice note on Henry Novak. This is what Karen thinks.
Hi, Peter. You just opened your show with David Lammy, again saying that the Henry Novak case reminds him of, George Floyd and Stephen Lawrence. They have nothing in common. Henry Novak was murdered by a racist. It was a racist attack because he was white. And when the police turned up, they believed this racist claim that was made by his brother, by the way. And when they got there, instead of assessing the situation and thinking, oh my God, this young man's in a poor way, who's on the floor, who's allegedly the perpetrator while the other person standing up, breathing, fit and healthy, I don't think so. Should have called an ambulance, but instead They have been taken in by the woke ideology. But another point, why can't these officers think outside the box? Have they been that indoctrinated? Have they just become robots? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Karen, some excellent points there, and food for thought there. Certainly a lot of all of that I'm going to bring up with Claire Coutinho and Zia Youssef. Claire Coutinho is the Shadow Energy Secretary. Zia Youssef, of course, the Home Affairs spokesman for Reform UK. I'll be speaking to them a little bit later on. In just a second, we're going to go to the debate desk. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman and Mike Indian, political commentators, both are going to give us their take on many stories circulating today. We'll go to a break in a second, but I just want to read two messages first. One from Howard, who says, "My fear is the police officers on the ground that I've talked to, they don't want change. When you talk to them, this rubbish is so ingrained. They are far too far down the rabbit hole. It won't change." Howard, thank you for that. Rob says, "Henry Novak died at the hands of a thug. All of society should be outraged. However, it was caused. Labour is just trying to make political gain instead of flipping Nigel's question in Parliament from a reasonable statement into something bad. Cold rage is not hot rage. I felt numb and cold when I heard how Henry died. I really hate how Labour are using Henry and his family to score points against Reform and Nigel." That is a very interesting point, Rob. Of course, the government would say that it's Nigel Farage trying to score political points. We'll continue to debate all of that. And indeed, Nigel Farage called a threat to democracy from Lucy Powell. Kind of interesting from the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party when they tried to cancel local elections. One person who was successful in those local elections is Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. He'll be with us in a second, along with Mike Indian. Stay with us here on Talk.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's have another look at what David Lammy told Sky News about the Henry Novak murder. This is something a lot of people are getting in touch about today. We're going to go to the debate desk in a second with Mike and with Matthew. Let's remind ourselves what the Deputy Prime Minister has been telling Sky News.
Seeing that footage of Henry Novak at the end of his life was deeply, deeply traumatic. I thought of my own sons around the same age. It brought back memories of George Floyd, of Stephen Lawrence. It was so painful, so harrowing, so horrendous, and my heart goes out to that family for the grace and dignity with which they are now having to conduct their lives.
And J.D. Vance, who is the Vice President of the United States, had what sounds like kind of a robust conversation with David Lammy. The two men have spent a lot of time together. Lammy, obviously the Deputy Prime Minister as well as Justice Secretary. This is how David Lammy spoke about to Sky News about that conversation with the Vice President.
I disagree with him. This has got nothing to do with mass migration. This young man was a Brit. Let's be clear about that. And I said, look, Mr. Vice President, you're wrong about this. And it's also the case that actually murder is coming down in the United Kingdom. So we had an agreeable conversation, but we disagreed.
But it sounds like you gave him a ticking off and told him to keep his nose out of our business.
We had an agreeable conversation because we have got a relationship, but I wanted to make him clear that I disagreed with some of the facts that he was asserting and to present the facts to him.
Penny in Essex has been in touch, says, good morning, Peter. Good morning, Penny. In relation to Lammy saying Digwa was British, Digwa, of course, was the murderer of Henry Novak. If you're born in a stable, it doesn't make you a horse, so if you're born in Britain, does it automatically make you British? Lammy is wrong, says Wendy. It's to do with immigration. Sikhism is not our native religion. Sikhs came with immigration, not a problem, but with them, they brought their religious knives. And instead of saying, no, we're not changing our laws for an imported religion, we did, and now Henry is dead. Well, Wendy, it wasn't the religious knife that was used to stab Henry Novak. It was another knife, but certainly very happy to read your point. Barry in Maidstone says David Lammy should not compare George Floyd to Henry Novak. Also, he would know a policeman if he saw one. We all know that. And Jane says David Lammy won't come on your programme, Peter, because you will probably ask him about Mastermind. He also makes a fool of himself elsewhere. He won't be missed, says Jane. I do wonder why those comparisons to Stephen Lawrence and George Floyd were made. There are many other horrific murders of which we know a lot that have happened in a very public way and where the police have attended and perhaps their response has been something of public debate. Lee Rigby would be another one that would just sort of pop into my head this morning. Another horrific murder, dreadful murder. I mean, all murder is dreadful, but that was particularly horrific. David Amos as well, you know, that was with a knife too, Sir David Amos. No comparison to that. Very interesting points there. Do let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. But I want to go to the debate desk now. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman and Mike Indian are with us. Hello, good morning to you both.
Morning.
Matthew, I haven't seen you since your victory in the council elections. You're a Conservative councillor as well as a political commentator. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
There are many Conservatives who struggled. You did not.
Well,
you did
we ended up with more councillors than we started in London for the first time, I think, since 2006. So it was I wrote an article about it saying that maybe this is the turning point for the Conservatives, but where I am in Harrow, yeah, we were returned, and I was very
We'll perhaps talk more about the Conservatives a little bit later on, but let me ask you about Henry Novak and the comments that have been made by the Deputy Prime Minister this morning. He says there isn't two-tier policing, and he says that there are many things that we need to talk about, including the police wanting to intervene in the murder trial and release a statement about disinformation. Your thoughts on that?
Well, where was the promise of change? Where was the actual action that's going to happen? Every politician always goes thoughts and prayers, it's heartbreaking.
Lessons will be learned.
Where is the actual change we're going to have? Are we going to go back to some common sense policing? Are we going to get rid of this DEI training in everything in life that seems to overtake any other sense of normality? Are we going to get... I know we're going to talk later on about shoplifting, for example. Are we going to get back to prosecuting crime, treating criminals as criminals, not wrapping them up in wool and saying, oh, but there might be other reasons or factors behind it? We need to sort out many things in this country, and... Many, reforms say that Britain's broken, for example. I would argue, actually, it's a bit of both. Yes, Britain is broken, but also there are very bad organisations, people who are managing things in the worst of ways that we need to change. So, again, my plea to David Lammy and the Labour government with a massive majority is stop talking about change and actually do it, because we're all fed up waiting for it and none of us can do anything about it. We're not the government, we're not MPs. They are in charge. They could do something about this, but we're all waiting.
We are all waiting, and the Makerfield by-election is happening. Andy Burnham is the leading candidate there, if the polls are to be believed. What change would he bring? Well, we don't quite know. He's been asked on a number of interviews, including a pretty disastrous one on BBC Newsnight this week. Mike Indian, your thoughts on the Novak incident and the trial and all the rest of it, please, but also your thoughts on whether Andy Burnham, as a Labour expert yourself, would make any difference.
There are certain cases that I think sum up, perhaps, and that strike a resonance of the public consciousness. And, you know, you spoke there about the comparison to David Lammy men. My mind went back to when Tony Blair was Shadow Home Secretary and the response he gave to the James Boulder murder in the 90s as well. What concerns me deeply is the fact this has very quickly become part of political discourse, and it's even reaching across the Atlantic, when what we should be examining here is the operational judgment of these police officers in the moment as to why they did not give this young man the medical attention he needed. Irrespective of whatever views or he was accused of, surely it is the job of the emergency services in this country to help preserve life, even to ensure people can, you know, be processed effectively.
We weren't there. I've never been in a situation like that. The police officers, there are 4 of them. 1 of them since resigned from the relevant police force. 3 may be subject to disciplinary action through the Independent Office of Police Conduct. What questions, at least, should be asked, do you think, Mike?
I think the question should be asked in the moment, why wasn't medical attention immediately sought? What training do the officers have to assess if somebody has... So, for example, we had this question a few weeks ago in relation to the Golders Green stabbing about police tactics being deployed there. Now we're seeing the opposite here, with officers almost being too cautious, as it were.
But actually, specifically, Henry Novak said that he had been stabbed.
Exactly.
And the police officer said, I don't think you have, mate.
Yes, and we've seen that this is not disputed. This is this is the advantage of having body-worn cameras. We can see this accountability. I think this is a great advent and evolution in our policing policy as well. Why wasn't he examined? All the officers do have basic first aid training. It's fairly obvious if someone has been stabbed. Usually, there's usually a great wound on them as well.
There's dreadful detail as well that has come out, and indeed there was a 5-minute video that Digwa took that wasn't even shown to the court because it was so horrific, of him filming Henry Novak, you know, pleading for life, pleading for some form of assistance. Mike, when we hear from David Lammy, we hear a lot of this is all dreadful and things have to change, but will they change? And specifically, if Andy Burnham ends up as the Prime Minister, will things change?
This is a very unusual area. So Andy Burnham coming in as a Labour leadership contender, as he's confirmed this week, and the contest is brewing, and I'd leave aside the fact that a by-election to decide who becomes the next Prime Minister seems to be an absurd thing for me. He has actually been operationally in charge of Greater Manchester Police as the mayor for that time. As a mayor, he has that kind of accountability. I think we should be looking very closely at the record that he has had in that time, you know, 8 years or so, in 9 years or so, running that force. He hasn't, you know, there's been serious questions, I think, in the time about how Sadiq Khan's applied his political judgment to the Metropolitan Police. And if Andy Burnham wants to be considered a viable contender for the Labour leadership, he needs to be talking about a wide range of areas. He was talking the other week about electoral reform, you know, in the next Labour manifesto. That's 3 years away at most. You should be talking now about how he would effectively police the streets of this country to ensure, as Mark Dillon said, colourblind policing in that way that everyone can be confident that when the officers arrive at the scene, they are going to assess the needs and ensure that the well-being of everyone there. Because at the end of the day, you know, his murderer may well have been jailed this week, but of course the question remains, had Henry Novak received medical attention, would that trial have been needed in the first place?
Yeah, very good point. Elisa has been in touch and says, good morning. Peter, if I was Henry's parents, I would be offended that Henry's murder was compared to George Floyd. George Floyd was a very nasty individual who committed many crimes. Henry was a law-abiding, innocent man. And with regard to the stoking up of division, it's not Nigel Farage that has done that. It's the other parties that have demonised him, trying to make political gains from his comments because they fear his inability to connect with ordinary people. It's utterly disgraceful. Well, we will be speaking to Zia Youssef, the Home Affairs spokesman for Reform, a little bit later on. I'm very interested to ask him very specifically, what would he change? How would he avoid these things happening in the future? And Nat has been in touch from Tel Aviv saying, is there anyone on this beautiful earth who cares about Deputy Prime Minister Lammy's opinion? As for Vance, the sole fact that he's friends with Lammy gives one enough reason to be at the very least sceptical. It's a legal requirement that we tell you about all the candidates in the Makerfield by-election. We've been talking about that. Of course, Robert Kenyon is the Reform candidate, and I will be asking Zia Youssef about him later on. And we know that Michael Winstanley from the Conservative Party is the candidate there. Claire Coutinho is the Shadow Energy Secretary. I'll be talking to her, but let me just read out all the names here. It'll just take a second. Has to be done by law. The Makerfield by-election on the 18th of this month. Jake Austin is standing for the Liberal Democrats, Count Binface of the Count Binface Party, Andy Burnham for the Labour Party, Dan Clark for the Libertarian Party, John Dyer's an independent, Ed Gemmell for the Climate Party, Paul Gould's an independent, Alan Howling-Laud Hope from the official Munster Raving Looney Party, Robert Kenyon from Reform UK, Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild, Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain, Sarah Wakefield, Green Party, Peter Ward, Rejoin EU, and Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. We'll talk more on the debate desk with Matthew and with Mike, and get your comments too. Give me a shout. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're just having a little bit of a laugh in the break there, comparing a few stories, but what's been said to be chilling, actually, was Andy Burnham being accused of an attack on free speech, as firefighters have been warned over their backing for Reform UK. We're on the debate desk, still with Mike Indian and indeed Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. Matthew, tell us what's going on here.
Well, so Andy Burnham, who, as Mike said, in his role as Mayor of Manchester, he's got these various positions to do with the police and the fire services, and senior figures at the Manchester Fire and Rescue Service say they have had words with employees who stood for or supported Reform UK at the local elections just happened, and even asking staff to inform their managers on any reform-supporting colleagues.
That's very weird.
This is 1984. This is disgraceful.
The thing with a lot of really important emergency service jobs, including firemen, policemen, and many others as well, is there are times when they're incredibly busy, and there are times when they're sitting around. And the sitting around is a major part of the job, and I'm not criticising them or saying anything other than that is a major part of the job. They're waiting for the calls to come about fires that happen. So they're going to talk about things, including politics, I would imagine.
Politics, you know, everyone says you mustn't talk politics at Christmas. Well, sorry, it wouldn't be Christmas at our household if you didn't talk politics. So, yeah, like, people will have conversations. We're all humans. But the fact that, A, you could be snitched on for your opinions, and B,
why just
actually
Reform
top
UK?
down wants to find out. I mean, that's ridiculous.
If there's a fireman sitting around saying, do you know what, I just love that Liberal Democrat leader, Davey, I just think he's brilliant.
I mean, he might be the only one, I don't know.
Would they be informing on him?
But probably not, it seems, from this. But, look, frankly, I don't care about the political opinions or the political beliefs of any service person.
If they could put fires out.
If they are running towards danger when we're all running away from it, I'm grateful. So, you know, I think this is another thing where, as you said, Mike, with Andy Burnham now wanting to become possibly the next Prime Minister, there is a lot of digging into his background, his track records, the things going on with him, and this is another example of something coming out where you go, oh, actually, I'm not too certain on that. And we saw it the other week with the promise of electoral reform to try and get some more Green and Lib Dem votes. That'll never happen. He even said that he might call an early general election. Now it's not going to happen. So he's already had a U-turn, so he's following the Labour manifesto, it seems.
I mean, I don't know about firefighters' political views, but, Mike, they do know quite a lot about polls. What do you make of this?
He's been Peter Cardwell. Good night. Good morning.
There is nothing of concern here apart from the fact that you're actively seeking to cool political discussion in Look, it would be different if people, whatever political party and persuasion, were going in and actively canvassing for support. in the room. I feel the same way about this as I feel about NHS workers wearing certain types of badges. You know, I had to deal with this in a previous role where, you know, we asked to comment and someone wanted to wear a particular badge to work. I said, look, your politics have no place in the workplace here. You have a job to do. And at the end of the day, someone's views don't dictate whether or not they're put in the light.
So you think that, we were talking about this yesterday in the programme, actually, you think NHS workers shouldn't have their pro-Palestine badge on, or indeed the pro-Israel badge, or whatever it is?
I think that...
What about LGBT lanyards?
I think any sort of political statement in the workplace has to be very carefully gauged, because at the end of the day, people are going there to receive healthcare treatment as well. There is a fine line between someone being, even as people here, we're all professional political commentators, even we recognise there are lines
matter of opinion, really.
The point is, you either let everyone or you let no one. Yes. You have to have a consistent rule. I've actually just read a bit further into this. There was an email that was sent round to members of the fire service by Carl Petch and Humara Ahmed, the joint heads of the Services Race and Faith Staff Network, another body that could probably be cut, and he was asking individuals to... this is ridiculous.
Asking individuals to what?
It was asking individuals to snoop in on Reform. It says, we're aware that some staff members have chosen to represent Reform UK in their local areas. We know this may cause concern within our network and wider. The individuals involved have been spoken to make it clear that as members of the GMFRS, the Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, our core values and professional behaviours must be displayed at all times. So are they saying that if you want to stand or support or you know,
serve
be
your
there
local neighbourhood
with the largest party currently polling, that's not representative of the Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue? That is really concerning. You suddenly can't have political opinions, it seems.
There has to be clarity that applies to all political parties here as well. It cannot be an exception just for Reform.
They should have said, we are aware that some staff members have chosen to stand in elections.
Yes.
We know this, you know...
They hoisted themselves by their own petard there.
Very good point. Thank you to the texter who says the destruction of the UK is deliberate. There's no debate now. It's everywhere to be seen. The government is deliberately damaging it. It's beyond repair. Mark in Coventry says, yesterday I read we're facing a super El Nino, first time since the 70s. What has this and previous governments done to prepare for an event? Build new reservoirs? No. Build desalination plants? No. Improve flood defences? No. Secured food security? No. Your views, please. Well, maybe I'll put that to Mike and then Matthew.
Well, this goes, I think, to the story that we're going to be talking about, where the government's looking at cutting capital investment across a swathe of departments.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is about defence as well.
To pay for defence.
So 1% off all departments.
And I find it baffling at a time in which, you know, we've had two massive tax-raising budgets. You know, one of the biggest tax-raising budgets in history was the first action of this government. And they are still looking at cutting things like capital investment, which at the start of this Parliament, Rachel Reeves was talking about as the engine for growth here as well. And Peter, you'll remember from your time in government as well that there was a lot of hard trade-offs at that time about current versus capital spending, long-term investment not being prioritised, but often, you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul, as it were, not yourself, obviously.
As long as he's not a working person, that's the main thing.
There's very little to rob when it comes to Peter, let me tell you.
This comes back to the fact in the last spending review settlement, DEFRA saw huge cuts, particularly its capital budget, and in all honesty, I think we should be worried about this. We should be looking at building in this kind of resilience, these kind of more extreme weather events.
Is that a form of defence, actually, as well,
it is,
Matthew, that we need to worry about? And do you support... I mean, we look at the welfare budget, I think it can be cut by a lot more than 1%.
Exactly what I was just going to come on to. So, obviously, yesterday was the 82nd anniversary of D-Day, and then the story comes up that we're planning a 1% cut in all budgets, including the defence budget, in a time where we've got war in Europe, war in the Middle East, and everyone feeling more and more unsafe.
On the front of the Mail on Sunday, saying that an entire fleet of UK attack submarines unfit for war and stuck in dock. We did talk a little bit about about D-Day yesterday and how we should memorialise and remember that there are still some veterans who were on those beaches there. But why are we not talking about that more, do you think?
This is the point. The 1% cut in all government departments is going to raise just £6 billion. We spend £300 billion a year on welfare. Imagine if we could... we only spend 60 billion on defence in this country, of everything. Imagine if we could cut the welfare budget and start spending some more of that money on defence, start spending that money filling in the potholes and fixing the pavements, start spending it on things that people want done every single day. end this net zero madness of building more turbines that then
well, in fairness, the government is saying they're taking money away from net zero, so they're doing what you want them to do. So there's some in that as well. And plenty of people getting in touch. Stephen in London says, JD Vance is right. Policing and the way police on the ground operate has been altered in the face of and due to immigration. John says, isn't it interesting that David Lammy has basically admitted two-tier policing does exist and, quote, the police can't always treat races equally, says John in Jersey. Well, he specifically said that two-tier policing doesn't exist, so I'm not sure he would agree with that. Tom in Pontypridd says the problem with the woke left is their belief that racism against a white lad like Henry simply doesn't exist and is impossible. That is where we have to start. And a final one before the break from a person who says the real worry is why someone like Lammy, who is clearly not intelligent enough to hold high positions of office, is given the position, just like Rayner, clearly not capable, lacking the acumen to be in Downing Street. Just shows the level politicians are at now. That's an interesting point as well. I mean, Lammy is an interesting character. Gary says, isn't it ironic, David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, in this DEI-obsessed government that is committed to promoting fair treatment, equal opportunity and full participation for all, won't speak to talk? Presumably, he thinks he's going to get a hard time. No, David, you will just face questions that you will have a hard time answering. As I have said on various occasions, David Lammy, always welcome on my programmes. Lots more to discuss with Matthew Goodwin Freeman and Mike Indian in just a second. I'd love your views as well on two-tier policing. We'll talk about that because the Iceland founder has talked about that in relation to shoplifting. Also, Dame Helen Mirren, that horrible incident where she was called a Zionist B-word, will not be investigated. Stay with us here on Talk.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Jane, who says the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance, isn't stupid. I'm sure after listening to the Deputy Prime Minister's version of events, he would ask for others' opinions. I'm sure he had read his social media too. Mark in Norfolk says the likes of Trump and Vance reflect the sentiment of millions of British people. Many may not like the personalities or even the characters, but the sentiment really does ring true with people who love this country, and the fear of Islamic influence is certainly not a phobia. It's the backdrop of creeping around the unacceptable minorities that leads to this kind of police behaviour. Well, really interestingly, actually, with police behaviour, the founder of Iceland has talked about two-tier policing after officers rushed to a store when a suspicious customer falsely accused staff of racism. We talked about that with Peter Blexley earlier. Matthew Goodwin Freeman and Mike Indian still on the debate desk with me. Matthew, what do you think of this?
Well, so I have experience of this as a local councillor. We have shoplifting, unfortunately, taking place in high streets up and down this country. We see it happening. Shoplifting costs the UK economy £4.2 billion a year. And then there's the loss of services, the loss of trust, the loss of people wanting to go out into their high streets. Now, all supermarkets and shops should and could report any incident to the police, provide CCTV footage. They might not be able to get the money back, they might not be able to get that the insurance, but that data is invaluable for the police to find and track these individuals. And in a lot of cases, the police know who they are. But many shops and supermarkets don't do that. It's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of time, they cannot be bothered to do it. And then we see the ridiculous situation where either staff members step in and lose their jobs, or, and I'm really sorry, the security guard that they have at the door of the supermarket stands and does nothing. What is the point in paying for a security guard if a security guard doesn't provide security?
Some of them are told not to do anything.
But then that is ridiculous. We need to change that, and we need to either bring in proper protections and proper security and proper punishments for these criminals, or we're going the other route where we say, actually, do you know what? Forget it. Everyone do what you want. It doesn't matter. There's no punishment. It's ridiculous, and it needs to change.
But they turn up when someone cries racism, which was not true in this case, and it wasn't true in the Henry Novak case either. It seems that the police are dealing with different crime. I mean, they will deal with different crimes in different ways. Of course they will. But when it comes to two-tier policing, the head of Iceland not happy with this, Mike.
I mean, describing this story, who would be a shop floor worker? I mean, I remember my first job was in retail long ago that I care to admit now, but you know, this wasn't a concern in that day. You know, we had, you know, it was a safer environment, it seems to be now. And if you walk into local shops now, you see certain goods inside, you know, it's like salmon just inside containers.
Yeah. I've seen chocolate inside containers.
And I think that's a damning indictment on the state of British society as well. And it should not fall to people who are earning some of the lowest wages in this country to be having to exercise judgment about, you know, security and things like that as well. And look, you know, I could sympathise with the judgment of a security guard that has to, you know, make a decision about picking London whether or not someone might be armed, you know, with a knife or something like that as well. But it doesn't excuse the fact that the security, it's the same with, you know, we talk a lot about guaranteeing the security of NHS workers, tackling violence against them as well. The same should extend to people that work in service industries too. It should be unacceptable to do that too, particularly as more and more of these jobs are being phased out in place of computers and AI as well. The job transformation means there's fewer staff on the shop floor and they're having to do more. And how can they focus on doing their jobs if they're looking over their shoulders constantly in a state of fear and agitation? That is not good for anyone's well-being.
But Mike, doesn't this show the extent that someone can just pull the racist card? They can just say that, oh, I'm being racially abused, racially aggravated, and the police will respond to that quicker. Surely we need to move where actually that doesn't count anymore. It doesn't matter what ist you call someone, they'll respond to the crime. And in this circumstance,
if someone is... I mean, it is a thing that's wrong, and there are aggravating factors. I mean, is your perspective... Well, hold on a second. Is your perspective that, for example, hate crime shouldn't exist, for example, that you can get a higher sentence? If I simply just shoot someone, but I can get a higher sentence if I, you know, shout a racial slur at them as I'm doing so?
Did you specifically go, in this hypothetical world, did you specifically go and target that person based on their race?
Yes.
Then you should get a higher sentence because you targeted it, and that is effectively a part of terrorism. It's specific with motives. But in this circumstance, the guy was taking milk bottles out of the fridge, opening them, probably having a drink from them, and then putting them back in. So a staff member remonstrated with them, and the next thing, the guy's on the phone claiming he's been racially abused. Now, I'd love to try and find the footage of this, but if the staff member made no comment at all about their skin colour, their ethnicity or anything like that, is it simply a card that someone can pull that they think gets them out of jail?
But it has been pulled, and it will continue to be pulled, and it is really horrible for the people who actually are victims of racism and are victims of all of the other isms, homophobia or whatever it is.
If it's used as
sexism,
a bandwagon, that then diminishes those who are genuinely victims. That's what's got to come out of this Henry Novak situation. We have to get back to a case where actually, if you false flag, if you say something that isn't true, there is a punishment for it. It's not a slap on the wrist or anything. It's a punishment.
OK. Let's talk about Sturgeon's husband, speaking of crime, Peter Merrill, who sold his Portuguese villa after claiming legal aid. I mean, this is just the story that the detail keeps coming. We're talking about this later in the programme as well. Mike, what do you make of this?
The story that keeps on giving, Peter. I mean, this inside the spending
My favourite bit, I said this yesterday, my favourite bit of all the spending, apart from the book Why We Get the Wrong Politicians, which was just like beyond parody that this was bought with the money.
Which is a good book.
It's a very, I would argue it's the third best book written about politics in the last 5 years.
Absolutely. Can I guess what the 1 and 2 talkTV might be, eh?
I mean, feel free. No, it was the motion-censored makeup mirror. The fact that the motion. That I mean. Anyway, he's
also 4 floor lamps costing £2,600. I mean, what?
How many floors have you got? Mike, what do you make of this Portuguese villa being sold and then legally into being cleaned?
I still think my favourite detail of this was the sheer sort of contrast where you had Peter Murrell spending tens of thousands of pounds on things like very high-range content, but also buying like a £2.50 wine from the shop as well. The inner Scotsman in him couldn't quite bear to go with it. I mean, on a serious note, I think this embodies a lot of why people feel a lot of loss of trust in politics, and the fact that these proceeds cannot be recovered is all the more staggering.
Well, it's also, I don't know, I mean, this is something that the vast majority of our viewers and listeners will not have done, but some people, I've done it in the past with a very small amount of money, but I've given a political donation. I give a political donation to someone who was running as a councillor, actually, to help them out. And it wasn't a huge amount of money at all. It was about 50 quid, and it was just to pay for some... in fact, I did it twice, to pay for some leaflets and things. But the people who give reasonably small amounts of money, whether it's a tenner or £20 or whatever, won't do that anymore, or they'll be put off this because they'll say that... Certainly in this case, that money was totally misappropriated.
Absolutely.
I mean, we talk about a lot about, so much stuff about, Farage got this 5 million quid and blah, 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 and where the money is coming from in our politics. But there are people who, for whatever reason, well-motivated people give money to all sorts of political parties that are, not going to break the bank, but it's all helpful.
Absolutely.
And they're going to be put off by this story.
Absolutely. Look, this was at a time when the SNP was, very much in ascension. It was commanding a great deal of support. And this money was taken, whether or not you believe it was the right cause or not, given in good faith towards campaigning for a second independence referendum. Now, I worry deeply about the influence of big money in our politics now, more so than, say, 10 years ago. I think we have very good safeguards in this country. You mentioned there that even small donations above a certain threshold have to be registered. And I think councillors do it. And I think that's a great thing that works well about our democracy as well. But if you come back to things like, looking at things like the influence of Elon Musk, looking at the positions of like Larry Ellison here on Tony Blair, there is more and more interest now. Politics is again becoming, I think, more and more the providence of richer people. And it doesn't help when politicians like Peter Murrell are seen to be behaving like the super rich in this regard.
Yeah, exactly.
And that damages
faith. Trusted with
the
people's money.
With the money of people who've given small amounts of money as well. Matthew, your thoughts on this?
No, absolutely. And this goes back to the trust in politics. As a local councillor, we have to declare gifts that we get, whether it's given a mug by people or a lunch or something like that. We have to declare everything, donations as political parties we get, all above thresholds. There's rules and regulations. The point is that there has to be enforcement of it. And what happened here is for years and years and years, this was going on. No one picked it up. No one realised. Not even Nicola Sturgeon picked up the accounts that she was signing off that her husband was embezzling.
Exactly.
And then we finally get the watershed moment. It all breaks out. I mean, the list is just crazy. I do want to find out what a £56 toilet seat looks like, because that's, I'm not too sure on that one. Is it made of, Scottish gold or something?
My absolute favourite image is this police squad trying to recover a £490 robot vacuum cleaner whilst it's just going around.
It's got to clean up politics somehow.
That's right.
But anyway,
maybe that was in the camper van, so it's kind of a smaller area to cover for the police. That's why they put, the forensic tent that was
to stop it. To clean it.
The robot vacuum cleaner contained.
The forensic tent that was up in front of the house, that was because they had so many items that they needed to take out and they didn't want the press to take photos of them. That's exactly the reason. I actually know the journalist Georgia Edkins who found the camper van, who's literally doing like classic journalism, shoe leather journalism, knocking doors around Peter Murrell's mother's house.
I do think they should make a long list of all of these items and the prices, so that then people can say other stores are available.
Yeah, it does. It is very kind of generation game.
It's like a wedding gift list.
Yeah, exactly.
Can the SNP members now win these back?
Well, they are trying to recover the money. Certainly.
It says it's going to come out of his pension. Otherwise, the SNP have to sue Peter Murrell for it back. So I'm not too sure how that's going to work out in the long run and actually get that money back to the party.
Well, listen, Mike Endian, thank you. Mike Endian, political commentator, Matthew Goodwin, Freeman, political commentator, who has a long interest in Peter Murrell's salt shakers. Lots more to discuss with all of this. We'll hear from Claire Coutinho, who is the Shadow Energy Secretary, after the news. We'll also be speaking to Zia Youssef. If you have any questions, things you want me to ask them, please do send them in. And thanks to everybody who's been in touch, particularly on Henry Novak. Nicola and Gwent says, good morning, Peter. Fantastic show as always. thank you, Nicola. Lamy stating that the killing of Henry was by a British man and it was nothing to do with illegal immigrants. It is to do with immigrants, as this man was seeing so many migrants getting away with everything, lower jail sentences. If they call racism, the police come ASAP. Yes, it is to do with illegals. Funny how he brought up cases, yet the young girl hacked with a screwdriver, not mentioned. Many cases he could have brought up. I'm not sure why George Floyd was brought up. I'm not sure why those other cases like Stephen Lawrence were brought up. There are many more recent cases as well. Paul says, so now when you call the police, the only crime you can use to get them to turn up to is racism. Thank you to Tier Care. Many, many people getting in touch, and we will, of course, take more calls, text, tweets and voice notes in the next hour. We'll be speaking to Claire Coutinho in just a second, the Shadow Energy Secretary, and Zia Youssef. Plenty more stories to discuss as well here on Talk, so do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can send me a WhatsApp on that number as well. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, I'm Peter Cardwell in for Alex Phillips this Sunday morning. I'm here between now and 1 and indeed all this week in my usual slot, the evening exchange between 7 and 10, Monday to Friday. So much to discuss this morning. We'll speak to the Shadow Environment Secretary in a second. Claire Coutinho will be with us, as will Zia Youssef, who is the Home Affairs spokesman for Reform UK. If you have questions you want me to put to them, I have my own, of course, but if you have some thoughts, do send them through 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss on the Novak case. David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, has been talking about that this morning. Also, cuts to net zero. Or do you support that, especially if the money is going to defence? Yet, we're in a situation, front page of the Mail on Sunday, the entire fleet of UK attack subs is unfit for war and stuck in the dock. We'll talk about that too. We'll also talk about why white men, or white middle-class men, are being discriminated against when it comes to public sector internships. Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrell, sold a Portuguese villa after claiming legal aid as well. Some of the stolen things can't be taken back. And we'll take a look as well at an event for veterans to do with horses. It's a really, really good event. We'll talk about that later on in the programme. So much to discuss, so many people who want to get on, and I will, of course, take as many calls, text, tweets and voice notes as I can as the show goes on. 0344 499 1000. You can text me at 7222. With the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. The question we're asking this morning, is Britain broken or just badly managed? So much to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, Claire Coutinho is with us now, the Shadow Net Zero Secretary and Shadow Energy Secretary. Claire, good morning.
Good morning.
I should say that David Lammy refused an interview with us this morning. I'd like to thank you for having the cojones, Coutinho, to face Talk this morning, and some tough questions are coming your way. I just wonder about the Henry Novak controversy, what has happened here. David Lammy says there is no two-tier policing in this country. What do you think?
I disagree with that. I think there is two-tier policing, but also we're seeing this problem across our public services. And in the case of the police, we know that there's a race action plan which says that they should treat ethnic minorities differently. I think that is the very definition of two-tier. And the problem that you've got is, look, the police's job is really hard. They have to make split-second judgments. They have to do something that none of the rest of us in politics have to do, go into these difficult situations and secure the public safety. And we shouldn't be clouding that judgment with ideology. But I'm afraid that is what we're seeing across public services, and what they're being taught to do is prioritise racism and not being seen to be racist above protecting the public from harm. So we have to change the system, and we have to make sure that all of these public servants are able to do their job.
We've seen the founder of Iceland, for example, talk about this and say there's a specific case that's in some of the papers today about the fact that the police came when there was a customer doing something that he shouldn't be doing, when he claimed Iceland staff were being racist towards him. You talk as well, you said this is with police officers clouding their judgment with ideology. Do you think that happened in the Novak case?
Well, we've called for a rapid review so that all the facts are established. But what we do know is that one accusation, which was of racism, was believed. And the other accusation, which was Henry himself, as he lay dying, saying, "I've been stabbed," was not believed. And Henry was put in handcuffs, where his perpetrator who had stabbed him was not put in handcuffs. So you can see that something very different was happening here. I do think we need to have a rapid review to establish exactly what went on. But what I think is undeniable is that across a number of instances now, you saw it in the case of the Southport killer, the Nottingham killer, the Manchester Arena bomber, there are a number of cases where the people that are meant to protect the public from harm felt unable to do that job because they were scared of being called racist. And I think in Henry's honour and out of honour to his family, politicians have to be unflinching at looking at what is going wrong and making sure that the training of the police, that the the action plans that are being put forward, all of these things which are based on quite radical ideology are being rooted out.
This hasn't come from nowhere, though, Claire, has it? Because this hasn't just emerged in the last couple of years, and some of those examples you gave happened under a Tory administration. I know the police are operationally independent, but do you think that the former government of which you were a part actually has questions to answer on this particular point?
Well, look, I definitely think we lost the election for a number of reasons. One is that we didn't get everything right. I would argue that nobody has done more in British politics than Kemi Badenoch to root out identity politics and call it out. And she was doing it when nobody was really talking about it, and she was vilified for it. So undoubtedly, there's probably more that we could have done. I'm sure there are instances and things that we could have changed. But I also think it's not just government. A lot of this stuff didn't come from just government. It's also a ideology that's spread across society. Identity politics is now, in our private sector, in our public sector, and what is happening is also the absence of strong leadership, because in the case of the police, for example, you had something which was an independent body from government, the National Police Chief Council, coming up with a race action plan and outsourcing the scrutiny of that race action plan to a group of radical activists, some of whom wanted to defund the police. There's an Islamophobia definition that the government has just adopted where exactly the same thing happened. You saw the same thing happening with Stonewall when it came to gender ideology. And what's happening in these institutions is that rather than deal with these difficult social issues themselves, they are outsourcing that thinking to groups of people with minority views who don't represent the public position, and they don't, in fact, in some cases, provide advice which is consistent with the law. In the case of Stonewall, for example, they were advising companies to break the law. So that is also part of the problem, this wider culture. We need to address both things.
I'm sure Stonewall would deny that, but I will certainly look into that. I just want to talk a little bit about your own, the department that you shadow, Net Zero. There have been cuts announced to it, and indeed the Conservative Party has changed its view rather dramatically on Net Zero since Theresa May brought it in and those legal targets that were there. That is not the policy of the Conservatives now. Is it right that Net Zero funding is cut and that money comes to defence? Is that something you can support that the government is doing?
Well, look, you're right, because I wasn't there during the Theresa May years when she pushed that legislation, and I think it's right that we've changed positions. It's one of the reasons I backed Cammy Badenoch to be leader, and you'll remember when I was Energy Secretary, I started with a net zero reset, saying we need to look at the cost of this thing. Whether it comes to cutting those particular policies, I'm sure there is plenty of it that I would agree with needs to be cut, but I don't think more broadly that is the only political choice you can make to fund defence. And what we've seen in this case
where else
that they're
would you
trying
cut,
to find
Claire?
an extra £6 billion.
Would you cut welfare?
So I'm just going to set that out if you give me a second.
Sure.
So what they're looking for is £6 billion by the end of this Parliament. Some of the other things that they said they're going to cut to fund that is transport projects, key infrastructure projects. And actually, instead of that, I think you should go to the welfare bill. To your point, the working age welfare bill is going up by £40 billion between now and the end of the Parliament. And that is not only completely unsustainable, but also, I think, a much better source of funds than transport, which brings growth and connectivity to our communities. So yes, I do think we need to get on top of the welfare bill, and if not, you will see some of these crucial areas be squeezed in order to fund what is undeniably a priority now, defence spending.
I have a question from a viewer. Alex in Cardiff says, could you please ask Claire Coutinho, firstly, does she think it may be a better use of billions on unproven carbon capture and build a Severn barrage with a 14-metre tide coming in and out? Would you reopen Aberforth gas-fired power station? Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on those issues.
So I made a speech 2 years ago saying we're going to need more gas-fired power stations because you need reliable power in the system. I think overall the priority has to be cheap energy. So a lot of these programmes that we were backing were based on carbon taxes and the rest of the world adopting these policies. If they're not adopting those policies, we have to make sure that we're not funding things that nobody else is going to use that are going to add extra costs to the system. So that's some of the things that I've already set out, is that you should get rid of carbon taxes, you need to get rid of the climate change legislation, and overall in the energy system we have to prioritise the cost and reliability of our energy.
And of course the defence aspects that need to be dealt with, the entire fleet of UK attack subs unfit for war and stuck in dock, according to the Mail on Sunday. This is the weekend where we remember D-Day, 82 years since those great sacrifices. I just wonder, Claire Coutinho, how we get proper defence spending. And again, this didn't come from nowhere. The Conservatives have a case to answer here as well. I'm sure you would agree.
Yes, look, I think from the Cold War, defence spending came down, other spending across society went up. We did start increasing defence spending, I think it was in 2019, but the world has obviously become more dangerous even since then. So you have to make choices when it comes to how you're spending hard-pressed taxpayers' money. And one of those choices is to prioritise, I think, the defence of the nation. I think the clear and obvious cost that is ballooning out of our control is the welfare bill. We have to look at that, but we also set out £50 billion worth of savings across the civil service and also our foreign aid budget. And I would just make this point. If you think about what governments are meant to do, first and foremost, we have to keep the public safe. Now, that means having a very serious conversation about where we're spending money, what's sustainable. And what you've seen from Rachel Reeves as she came in, she borrowed £70 billion she didn't tell anyone about. She's been taxing people left, right and centre. Inflation has been going up. You cannot keep going like that. You have to have a serious conversation about state spending. As far as I can see, there's no other political party that has set out credible cuts to spending in the way that we have, in order that we can do these important things like bring down borrowing, making sure we can invest in defence, making sure that we can have a better future.
Will you be heading to Makerfield to campaign for your candidate, Michael Winstanley, or is it just a waste of time?
Well, look, I think Michael Winstanley is a great man. I think anyone who watched him on Question Time will have seen a man who of great decency and is arguing for the right things, lower taxes and better policies for businesses and people in Makerfield. I will be spending more time in Aberdeen South because, obviously, as Energy Secretary, there's a lot of policy issues I want to press the SNP and other people like Labour there, because I think what they're doing on energy policy is completely disgraceful, and we need to make sure that we can back the North Sea. But yes, I will absolutely be supporting Michael in his endeavour because I think he's a great man and a very decent bloke.
OK, Claire Coutinho, Shadow Energy Secretary, thank you for joining us on Talk this morning. Lots in that. Let me know your thoughts, and also about Zia Youssef, who's coming up after the break, the Home Affairs spokesman for Reform UK. We'll speak to him and give him the tough time in any interview as well, including the ones that David Lammy has ducked this morning. Stay with us here on Talk.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Sinks, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we'll be speaking to Zia Youssef in just a few minutes' time, but I want to take a call from Michael in Hertfordshire. First, he's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Michael, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's talking about the shoplifting.
Yes.
The main problem is the police don't want to do anything, mainly because if they catch anybody, they go to court, they get no sentence, and they're let off.
Yeah.
The other thing is the prisons are all full, so they can't even put them in prison.
Well, this is the thing, and there's a big debate as well, Michael, about short sentences, whether they work or whether they don't. But, I mean, I reported magistrates' courts as a journalist earlier in my career, and there were often people who had, I mean, quite literally, like 120 or 130 shoplifting convictions, and they've been given every possible chance, community orders and suspended sentences and all the rest of it. And then the judge says, look, I've got to send you to prison because you're clearly not getting the message here. We've got to have this.
I have a suggestion, Peter.
Go for it.
Anybody that's caught, if they're on welfare, the welfare should be cancelled.
It's a very interesting point, and certainly what I often find and often see is that they get fined maybe 40 quid and they say, we'll take £1 a week or £5 a week off your benefits for the next however many weeks it takes to,
exactly.
you know...
So if they threaten them with the benefits, then I think a lot of people, well, not all the people on benefits that do it, but I bet you a vast majority are, and that will stop them risking it.
There's got to be a disincentive, Michael, doesn't there?
Absolutely. And the other thing I'd like to talk about, if you don't mind, is about the two-tier policing.
Yes.
It's not only the police. There's a worrying problem in schools as well.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers are frightened to give equal punishments because they're accused of being racist.
They're all paranoid. There are loads of people...
That hasn't been brought up.
That's a very good point, Michael. And there are loads of people absolutely paranoid. And there are people who know that if they, if something goes wrong at work, if they are accused of doing something wrong, or they're accused of maybe not being good enough at their job, or their appraisal doesn't go very well, they can just play the race card. And there are loads of people who are victims of racism, and I want them to not be victims of racism. I want them to be treated equally and properly and not discriminated against. And that devalues that as well. It devalues it when it actually happens, when people cry these cards and say, oh, that was because of racism or homophobia or sexism or whatever, when actually it isn't.
100%, 100%. And going back to the welfare problem, when they cancelled the two-child benefit, absolutely ridiculous. Do they think the children are going to get the money? I'm not saying some will, but a lot of these people will have more children to get more money, and the children won't get it.
Do you honestly believe people are having... Hold on a second, Michael. Do you honestly believe people are having more children in order to have benefits? Is that really incentivising them to do that?
Now they will.
Okay.
100%.
Okay. Well, listen,
100%.
Thanks for your call. I really appreciate it. That's Michael there, who's given me a call from Hertfordshire. You can get on the line too, 0344 499 1000. Sean in Gloucester says, I'm absolutely bloody furious. The Uni Party have dragged us down to such a level that something like the murder of that poor lad Henry happens. Both the Tories and especially Labour need to hang their heads in shame, but we both have the temerity to criticise Nigel, who only says what we're all saying. Yet Keith Stalin denies two-tier anything. Well, it's not just him, it's actually David Lammy as well. Brian says politicians have had their chances for decades and it's clearly not working. They're incompetent about running a country. This country should be run like a business with the best man or woman for the job with a proven track record in their field. Politicians should be a thing of the past. They have proven time and time again they're totally incompetent. Time for change, says Brian. If it's not politicians running the country, who should it be, Brian? John says the Conservatives fully implemented the disastrous and deeply wasteful mandate to close all UK local fired power stations. UK primary fuel diversity reduced, increasing dependence on gas, causing price volatility and giving us little or no fuel storage. The Conservatives should have reversed the mess that they have created, giving the UK access to international traded coal markets. I should have mentioned some of that to Claire Catino. I just didn't have time within the interview, but thank you very much for that. Gary has a voice note on the continuing controversy over Henry Novak. This is what Gary has to say.
Good morning, Peter. Absolutely love your show. I'm Gary from Bexley Heath. I've really become completely fed up with all these words from the government. You know, lessons will be learned. I'm deeply shocked. Our prayers and thoughts are with you. No, we don't need your thoughts. We don't need your prayers. We need action. You know, words are good, but words mean nothing unless they're followed up by action. This government and previous governments are all complicit.
Gary, some really, really good points there from Gary. And actually, we see this so often, and I think Starmer does it a lot, where he sort of diagnoses a problem and says, yes, this is dreadful and something must be done. You're the Prime Minister, mate. You have incredible power. You have a vast majority. You're the most powerful person in the country. Sort it out. Just stop saying, isn't this dreadful, and lessons will be learned. Learn the lessons now. Sort it out now. You have the awesome kind of power that you have, and so much more can be done, because there is so much that should be done. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens, not just with the Makerfield by-election, we've been talking about that, but also the next election. And Zia Youssef is Reform UK's Home Affairs spokesman. He may end up as Home Secretary if Reform UK win the next election. Zia, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming on the programme today. I appreciate it. David Lammy dodged it, so you have the cojones to actually come on, talk and answer some questions, so I appreciate that. Maybe you can give me your thoughts on the fact that the Deputy Prime Minister has told Sky News this morning that two-tier policing does not exist in the UK, particularly in the context of what's happened with the Henry Novak.
Seeing that footage of Henry Novak at the end of his life.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure. There was a technical error there. Apologies, Zia. The Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, has said that there is no two-tier policing in the context of Henry Novak. What do you make of this?
Well, he's not only the Deputy Prime Minister, he's also the Justice Secretary. I think even one of those titles is too much for David Lammy. Giving him two is a farce. But I was just on the BBC on Laura Kuenssberg's show with him. He was on the same show. And before I went on, he, as well as saying there's no such thing as two-tier policing in this country, he also said that, no, the police, when pushed, to be fair, the BBC did push him on this, do you think the police should treat everybody the same regardless of their race? He could not answer yes. He could not answer yes. And he also said, and I couldn't believe my ears when he said this, David Lammy said that equality, quote, does not mean treating people the same. No, that's literally the dictionary definition.
That's exactly what equality means. It's exactly what equality means.
I don't know what kind of world we're living in now, what kind of country we're living in now, where the Justice Secretary and the Deputy Prime Minister are making such statements which are not only disagreeing with logic, but disagreeing with themselves, literally on the same show. I think anybody who has watched that body cam footage, if it doesn't leave you shocked, if it doesn't leave you angry, if it doesn't leave you crying out for change in our political system, I can't really help you. And, you know, I want to make this point too, because often people say, oh, well, Zia, are there no, yeah, it was also put to me on the BBC, are there no examples of the police being racist to ethnic minorities? And I said, well, of course, such examples exist, but such examples would be in direct violation of the police code of conduct. Whereas actually, if you read the Race Action Plan, which, by the way, was brought to bear under a Tory government, not being racist to white people is in defiance of the Code of Conduct. The Police Race Action Plan explicitly demands that British police officers do not treat people the same regardless of their race, explicitly demands that they do not behave in a, quote, colourblind fashion, and demands of them that they prioritise, quote, offences that cause the most harm to ethnic minority communities. Now, we can concede, let's concede that all of this was well-intended, and let's not impugn the intentions of those who brought these things to bear. We can concede those points and still arrive at the conclusion that there is structural anti-white racism endemic inside British policing. And that's the point I was making. If you watch that horrific body cam footage, which resulted in the last words Henry Novak heard on this planet Earth being his rights being read to him by a Hampshire police officer as he bled to death, and when he said that I have been stabbed repeatedly, the response he got from Hampshire police was, quote, I don't think you have, mate. Those abominable statements,
yes,
this despicable state of affairs is directly downstream from the structural anti-white racism that is now literally written in the Code of Conduct that people can read right now in the police's website.
I want to talk just a little bit about your party's response to that and your response to that and your party leader's response. Let's just have a quick look at the clip of what Nigel Farage said in Parliament on Wednesday about this, and then I'll come back to you.
It is now clear to growing millions in this country that we're living under two-tier policing. The instructions that are given to police officers from police bosses are clear and written down in ink. It says you must treat different ethnic groups in different ways.
Also, as part of that exchange, Zia, there were many MPs shouting at Nigel Farage to condemn the violence in Southampton, the violence that led to 11 police officers being injured and a police dog as well. You may end up as the Home Secretary and the police officers will be looking to you to defend them. Would you like to take this opportunity to condemn that violence?
I've condemned that, on the day that multiple news outlets, I don't know if Talk did, I don't know if you did, but many news outlets, including, for example, Sky, claimed Reform have refused to condemn that. Nonsense. I did the morning round that day. I was asked that multiple times. And of course, I condemn that. Any form of violence on our streets, including and especially violence towards our brave and courageous police officers, is to be condemned. But I take exception to the idea that, Reform are under any greater burden than anyone else to condemn such things. And I would point out, too, that, well north of 100 police officers were totally unacceptably injured as a result of the protests in the wake of the killing of George Floyd and BLM. And, we saw a cultural revolution in this country driven by organizations like the BBC, by the likes of Keir Starmer, by many, many different politicians. And I want to make this really important point. Okay. The Reform have been the first ones to come to the public square to make the arguments for example, the brave police officers, one of whom had their nose broken at Manchester Airport, right? We have made the point that the vilification of those officers and the, frankly, two-tier justice that we saw from those brutes who attacked armed police at that airport. We were the first ones. No one was more vociferous than us. And Reform will continue to stand up for and make the case for the extraordinary number of brave and courageous and brilliant police officers across this great country. But what we saw in that body cam footage with regards to the murder of Henry Novak was not an example of the police being unfairly vilified. It is an example of two-tier policing. And I want to make this point too, that while the conduct of those officers must come under great scrutiny, clearly, the conduct of those officers is directly downstream from the code of conduct that the police are made to adhere to with zero tolerance, for deviation.
So on day one, if you end up as Home Secretary, how would you change that? What would you actually do to change things, to move things to a view of exactly what you've been talking about in the last few minutes, Yusuf?
Yeah, so we have already announced that what we would do is launch, we would pass the Equal Treatment Act. And what that would do is abolish immediately all of these DEI programs, including and especially the, quote, race action plans, which I want to emphasize again, were not a product of a Labour government. They were a direct product of Conservative governments. And in fact, the race action plan, the National Race Action Plan, cites the race report that Kemi Badenoch herself authored as inspiration. So we are going to remove all forms of DEI from policing. We will also, and we're the only, the Labour Party have not committed to this, the Tory Party have not committed to this. Reform are also taking the view that we would immediately ensure that nobody gets to carry deadly weapons on our streets unless you're law enforcement. So I don't care what religion you are. I don't care how ceremonial, in quotes, your dagger is.
So you would stop the
carry. There will be no religious exemption.
Okay, so you would stop the Kirpan being carried. I wonder, I mean, you've criticised a number of politicians, including Kemi Badenoch, you've criticised Starmer and various others, and Lamy and various others as well. If Reform UK is going to win the next election, as a lot of our viewers and listeners would like it to, not all of them, but a lot of them, surely unity is incredibly important. Do you think calling out your party colleague Robert Jenrick on Twitter and having debates, arguments, whatever you want to call them, with him publicly is something that is going to help Reform UK win the next election or hinder it?
Well, there was no debate or argument between me and Robert Jenrick at all. What I did was clarify what the policy position is. And look, maybe it's because I'm not a career politician. I've not been a career, but I came into politics 2 years ago, having worked in the private sector, worked in the city, started a business.
You've learned a lot in 2 years, though. You've learned a lot in 2 years.
My priority was this, ensuring that voters have the correct information as to what our position is. And while, look, I understand why, media, not just you, but many people might try to portray that in some different way. What I did with that tweet, if you actually read the tweet and you take it at face value, which is what you should do, is clarify what Reform's position is.
Was Robert Jenrick happy with it?
With regards to people who live in social housing. If you're a foreign national, I mean, think how insane it is. I mean, I put it to you, like, how insane is it, the British taxpayers? I mean, you clearly pay taxes. How do you feel about the idea that foreign nationals are living in social housing at the behest of your taxpayer money? It's...
And the point is clearly
so
your
beyond
policy.
insane, I can barely comprehend
and many people will agree with the policy, but was Robert Jenrick happy with it? What was your next interaction like?
It's fine. We're getting on with the job. I mean, again, I think that, look, again, I'm not a career politician. My priority was making sure that if you read my tweet, what I was doing is ensuring that the public, the voters, the people who matter most, understand what Reform's policy is.
Robert Kenyon, another person who's not a career politician, he's got in a lot of hot water for his comments. Do you think he should apologise to Carol Vorderman? Should he apologise for some of the comments that he's made about women not being able to referee rugby matches, for example, and worse? Or with stronger comments, perhaps? Surely, if he just apologised for the former comments, he could get on with running in the Makerfield by-election.
Yeah, look, I think we're beyond the stage where that sort of listen, I know Rob. I've spent a lot of time now with Rob because he stood for reform in the 2024 general election. He got 31.8% of the vote in that constituency. Remarkable result. You know, twice as much support as the party commanded nationally, which is already ridiculously good. He's a great guy. He's an earnest guy, and you know he has put himself out there. You know, he's still running his plumbing business. He's a normal person, and you know I think that if we want people coming to politics to be real people, then we have to accept that maybe they might have said some things which he would have perceived to have been probably in a private context, because he wouldn't have considered himself a public figure.
Well, he wasn't a public figure, but it was public what he said. And if you put something on Twitter, it is public.
No, I agree with that. No, so that is totally fair. That is a totally fair point. I'm making the point that at that point he would not have considered
and that's a fair point.
Those comments to be read. But look, all I can speak to is having looked him in the eyes, having spent a great deal of time with him. I think he's a terrific person. I think he'd be a brilliant constituency MP.
Is he going to win, though? Andy Burnham, certainly with the various opinion polls, seems to be home in a boat in various regards. And one thing that you haven't mentioned is Restore Britain, which is clearly causing you at least some problems in that constituency and elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very close. I think Makerfield, I've spent quite a lot of time there since the by-election was called. I think it's going to be extremely close, and anyone from Makerfield listening to this or watching this, I'd encourage you to appreciate how close this is going to be. And look, this is ultimately a general election that is being held in a single constituency. So, you know, we know that Andy Burnham is in favour of reversing the changes that even Shabana Mahmood, the current Labour Home Secretary, would want to make with regards to ILR, delaying potential citizenship. So these are really serious. I mean, north of 1 million people could end up being British citizens as a direct result of the results in Makerfield. In terms of, you know, Restore and other parties, look, the beauty of a democracy in this country is that anyone can start their own party. I don't begrudge that of anyone. And I'm on the record as saying this, I'll say it again. Look, I think there are millions and millions of people in this country who are seeking the highest octane propellant to throw out the political establishment. I understand that in my bones because I've dedicated my life now to doing that. Nigel has dedicated decades of his life to doing that. Voters are going to have to make their own decisions on this, but I would make our case to them that the highest octane propellant to throw out the establishment is reform, and we are the only party capable of doing that.
Speaking of high octane, I just have 2 more questions for you, Zia, and then I'll let you get on with your Sunday. You had some pretty fractious discussions with various journalists this week, including Cathy Newman of Sky News. She has complained and said that she's got a lot of abuse as a result of that. Do you think you bear any responsibility for that?
Why would I bear responsibility for that?
OK. And final question, the Mail on Sunday has talked about an entire fleet of UK attack subs unfit for war and stuck in the dock. We were also talking about the Labour government. Perhaps you support them, I don't know, in regard to their thoughts to give more money to defence, 6 billion more to defence. I also wonder whether that is something you would support, taking money away from the NHS, for example, especially as it is the 82nd anniversary of D-Day this weekend, I should say, as we remember the brave men who fought for us then. What are your thoughts on the defence matters?
Yeah, I mean, especially given how close we are, just yesterday that we commemorated that D-Day anniversary, and our lives would be immeasurably worse were it not for the extraordinary sacrifice made by so many for us. And I think it's more important than ever that we remember and acknowledge that. In terms of defence, look, I've said this time and time again, you know, everybody I speak to in the military of varying degrees of seniority, including some very senior people across the military and intelligence, they tell me our military is entirely hollowed out. We are utterly incapable of defending ourselves as a nation. I take no pleasure in saying that, but we should recognise how this has happened. When the Tories came to power, defence spending was at 2.7% of GDP. When they left, it was 2.3% of GDP.
So where would you take the money from?
Despite all of the talk of Labour, we're going to have to increase that. We were the first ones.
Where does it come from?
In the general election manifesto, we talked about taking that to 3 and 3.5%.
Where does the money come from? Where does the money come from?
Before we start talking about cutting funding to the NHS, we don't need to talk about that. That's not our position. Let's talk about the 15 billion quid that British taxpayers have had to spend on universal credit alone. Just one aspect of welfare spending that is spent on foreign nationals, and that was just over the last 18 months. Successive governments have hidden how much money, for example, the NHS spends on foreign nationals, the amount of money we spend on states' pensions for foreign nationals. There's a huge amount of money there. But what is crystal clear is that we learned from this Iran war that Britain is incapable of projecting power to such a degree we couldn't even put a destroyer in the theatre of battle on a multi-week notice period. You probably read the reports. Our nuclear deterrent is unfit for purpose. It largely does not work, and and inevitably is reliant on a foreign power to ensure that it does work. Our F-35A and B fleet could be grounded without the consent of a foreign power. These are unacceptable conditions. So do we need to spend more on defence? Look, whatever you think of President Trump, he has ushered in, more than anybody, a period of raw, hard power. That is the world that we live in today. And how we are still spending, by the way, 14 billion quid on foreign aid to generate soft power. Well, we spent 200 billion pounds over the last 15 years on foreign aid. People watching this programme, listening to this programme, ask yourself how much more powerful you feel as a result of all that money being spent.
Zia Youssef, Home Affairs spokesman for Reform UK. Appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you for being interviewed. Lots to discuss in what Zia Youssef said. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000, and we'll talk a little bit about Peter Murrell in just a second. The ongoing saga over Nicola Sturgeon's former husband. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, we're back. I didn't realise that. Apologies. Thanks to everybody who has been in touch, including Leslie, who says the difference in watching and listening to Zia and listening to Lammy is like comparing night and day. Sue says Lammy is a fool if he really believes that the murder of Henry Novak had nothing to do with mass immigration. The breakdown in law and order across the board is a direct result of identity politics, appeasement of minority groups and our tolerance of the intolerant, says Suze. I want to talk about politics in Scotland now, because this sort of nonsense, but also incredibly important things about Peter Murrell continues, particularly the new point in all of this, that Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrell, sold a Portuguese villa after claiming legal aid. The doyen of political correspondence in Scotland, John Boothman, who works for the Sunday Times in Scotland, is with me now. John, really appreciate your company this morning. Apologies for keeping you waiting a few minutes there just with Zia Youssef. That interview overran slightly. Tell me your thoughts on this and what's actually happening with this Portuguese villa.
Well, in public, that Peter Murrell and his family and some friends owned the villa in the Algarve. The Telegraph estimating this morning worth north of about £350,000. We know this because Nicola Sturgeon and Peter Murrell used to go there fairly regularly on holiday. And there were always stories about the villa. There were stories about where they would go when they were there. So that's pretty well known now. Basically, what's happened here is he appears to have sold this villa last October, 6 months, his share in the villa, 6 months after he received legal aid. Now, some people might ask, why was he receiving legal aid in the first place?
I'm certainly asking that question.
You know, this was a couple who, you know, whose joint incomes were, again, you know, more than £250,000. You know, he was earning, you know, half of that for a good number of years. But the reason that he would receive legal aid in Scotland is because after he was arrested in 2024, his assets in Scotland, that's the marital home, his pensions, he's got a pension pot apparently of £600,000, and other assets, including that motorhome, were basically seized under a restraining order, which meant that he couldn't dispose of them. But again, it seems to be the case that his equity in this Portuguese villa was not seized. So this is raising interesting questions. The Conservatives saying, for example, this morning that having stolen from SNP donors and the public purse, Murrell's now being allowed to fleece the taxpayer for his legal costs. The other thing that's very interesting, just as a matter of fact here, is that in England, it appears that criminal legal aid can be clawed back. But in Scotland, the rules are different, and that is not generally the case. So again, the Labour Party have been saying this needs to be looked at, and, you know, the Murrell case has thrown some light on all of this.
John Swinney, the First Minister of Scotland, has been a bit on the old snippy side when it has come to journalists' questions about this. He's given no comments. He's said there won't be a public inquiry into all of this. He was a childhood friend, of course, of Peter Murrell, and part of his rise in the SNP was to do with Peter Murrell. There's no suggestion, obviously, that Mr Swinney is not acting in a way that he should be or in any way illegally. But the point is, I suppose, John, that many, many answers will have to come. Where will they come from? The SNP having some sort of inquiry into this themselves, but will the full truth ever be known, and will that money ever come back to the SNP and, of course, those donors, who many of whom give small amounts of money in good faith because they wanted to see Scottish independence, not a camper van being purchased?
Look, there's a number of issues there. It's day 13 of this story. It's hugely embarrassing for the SNP. That's why Swinney is getting, to say the least, tetchy about it, and there's no end in sight to when this will stop. In answer to one of your questions there, we will know on June the 23rd, in a couple of weeks' time, when Peter Murrell gets sentenced, how long he will have to spend in jail, and we're expecting that that's what would happen. You know, one of the other things things that might happen on June the 23rd is there might be some kind of plea in mitigation of that sentence from Peter Murrow. You know, the big question, and Nicola Sturgeon herself has said this, the big question for everybody is, why did he do this? Why, being himself in such a comfortable position in terms of his work and his pay and his assets that we've heard about a few minutes ago, what motivated him to do this? So maybe some light will be thrown in that. The other point that you make about Swinney being tetchy relates to what kind of, if there should be any at all, inquiry should there be into this. Now, Swinney so far has said that the police investigation, which was carried out, as we know, in a lot of detail, but behind closed doors for a long time, is sufficient and there shouldn't need to be any other inquiry. Certainly some privately in the SNP are urging him to have some kind of inquiry, maybe put a KC, a senior KC, to carry out something independent. But, you know, the remit of that would be very limited. Some talk about, for example, just to examine the changes that Swinney himself has introduced to the financial regulations and the governance of the SNP. However, you know, there's three other ideas very quickly. The Scottish Parliament will debate the idea of an inquiry to be carried out by a Holyrood committee this week. Swinney's already rejected that. Jack McConnell, the former First Minister, wants a Westminster and Holyrood joint inquiry. I can't see that getting very far. The most likely thing is probably a Westminster inquiry carried out by the Scottish Affairs Select Committee.
John, just before you go, I got in trouble on one occasion by calling someone a veteran political correspondent. I hope you don't mind me calling you a veteran political correspondent. Have you ever seen anything quite like this, just briefly?
Old and grumpy usually does. No, I don't think there's ever been a story like this in Scottish politics. Who would have imagined the person running the country, married to the person in charge of the biggest political party in the country, getting into this kind of trouble?
John, neither old nor grumpy. Thank you very much indeed. John Boothman there, who is the political correspondent of the Sunday Times in Scotland. Remarkable, and there are many, many revelations that keep coming. Actually, tomorrow night, Ruth Davidson, the former leader of the Conservatives in Scotland, she's now a member of the House of Lords. Ruth Davidson is going to be with me at 8 o'clock tomorrow night on the Evening Exchange. I'm on all week between 7 and 10, so tune in for that, and I'll obviously ask her reaction to all of that. The FIFA World Cup kicks off next Thursday, and our friends at talkSPORT are sending you and a friend straight to New York City with Adidas, the tournament's official match ball supplier. It's the ultimate trip to watch England face Panama live at the MetLife Stadium. Return flights, hotel, match tickets and spending money, all taken care of. Plus Adidas is throwing in the official Trionda match ball and a fresh pair of boots. So don't miss out. Here is how to enter.
For your chance to win, head to our friends at talksportwin.com or text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close on the 12th of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksportwin.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Seats, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel.
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Kevin's in Basingstoke and has given me a call on 0344 499 1000. Kevin, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, if you look at crime statistics over the last 30 years, it's the number of crimes reported to the police is about 6 million, and that's how it's been for the last 30 years, every year. That doesn't take. When you think that there's a lot more people in the country too, so that there's probably 10 million more people, a lot more immigrants. So it's much easier to report a crime now. You got. A lot of crime you report online you didn't have before.
I've reported a crime, Kevin, and I would argue that it's actually not easy to do so. I filled in the form that needed to be done, so I did so with Greater Manchester Police. And the point, your point may well be absolutely correct, but the fact is a lot of people don't report crime. We know that with shoplifting, for example, lots of stores just hold on a second. We know that a lot of stores just don't report it. We know that people don't have the level of confidence in the police that they used to have when it comes to actually solving crime.
Well, no, because it's easier. There's more people reporting crime than there used to be because it's much easier.
Well, you just said it was 6 million, which was the same in the last 30 years. So which is it?
Well, it's easy to commit. It's easy to report crime, and there's more people.
Yeah.
So there's more people reporting crime.
But you just said a minute ago that this level of reported crime was the same. It was 6 million. So you just contradicted yourself.
Well, no, because there's more people. There's more people in the country, isn't there? It's probably 10 or 20 million more people.
Okay, yeah, that's correct.
It's easier to.
But there aren't more people reporting crime. You've contradicted yourself, Kevin.
No, no. I haven't. Look, let me just get my point across without you confusing me. There's a lot more people. There's a lot more immigrants. It's much easier to report crime than it used to be, and there's a lot more.
Well, I disagree with you that it is easier to report crime. What's easier than picking up the phone and talking to a police officer? A lot of people. Hold on, Kevin. If we're going to have a conversation, you've got to let me speak.
I haven't got long.
If people are reporting crime most people, myself included, would like to talk to a police officer. That often doesn't happen. Instead, you're given an online form where you've got to fill out loads and loads of different information. So I would argue it's actually more difficult to report crime than it was previously.
Well, the other ways haven't gone, have they? You can do it online.
It takes a lot longer. You've got to wait a lot longer. Often you can't go into a police station because they've often closed and speak to a police officer and report crime that way. So I would argue it's harder. Fewer people are actually have got confidence in the police to solve the crime. Crime may well have gone up. We don't know because we don't have reliable statistics. But there are a lot of people who don't have the confidence to report crime. We were talking about reported crime, which is fine, but the point is that a lot of people don't have confidence in the police to actually solve it.
Well, I don't agree with you. Anyway, I agree that the Conservatives slash police numbers...
You may not agree with me, Kevin, but there are lots of people that do not have faith in the police to solve crime. Why would it not be the case that these different supermarkets, for example, aren't reporting crime? Why would it not be the case that banks don't report fraud, for example? They wanted to bring it in-house so they could solve it themselves. So that is a lack of confidence in the police.
Cybercrime has gone up massively.
Yeah, I know.
Massively.
Yes.
But the number of crimes hasn't gone up. It's actually stayed pretty much the same. I mean, you didn't have mobile phones years ago.
Yeah, well, crime has definitely changed. No doubt about that, Kevin. Yeah.
So you didn't have mobile phones. You didn't. I mean, there wasn't online crime, and they've gone up hugely.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at crime statistics and the population size, they've stayed pretty much the same. And there's a hell of a lot more immigrants. So I don't know why people blame immigrants for crime statistics going up when they've actually gone. They're pretty much similar.
Well, the proportions.
More immigrants doesn't mean more crime. And if you look at homicide and violent crime, that's gone down.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't have those statistics in front of me, but Kevin, listen, thanks for your thoughts. Sorry, Kevin, I don't mean to cut you off. Can we put Kevin back up just to get a final word from him? Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, well, you should have those statistics in front of you if you're reporting on it.
How can I have every single statistic in front of me? Hold on, Kevin, you've got to listen to me. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to have a conversation. How can I have every statistic in front of me that every caller could possibly conceivably bring up? How is that possible?
Well, you can have a list of crimes. I mean, violent crime and homicide, I think that would probably be the two statistics that you should have.
Okay, well, I've plenty of pieces of paper in front of me. I don't have every single possible thing that every single caller can pull out of the air at any possible point. I think that is entirely ridiculous as a point to make. But Kevin, thank you for your call. Appreciate it. That was Kevin in Basingstoke there. If you want to join him on the air, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Kevin saying that more immigrants do not mean more crime. I wonder what you think about that. We'll talk more about all these issues in just a second.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. It's just gone 12 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. This is Talk. I'm in for Alex Phillips today between now and 1, and I'm back all week on the Evening Exchange tomorrow night from 7. We've got an interview with Ruth Davidson from the Conservatives. She will be with us tomorrow night. A rare appearance on Talk for her, but loads to talk about today, whether it is to do with police and crime statistics, as Kevin was talking about a second ago, whether you want to talk about defence. We've got Sir Liam Fox, the former Defence Secretary, in a second. He's going to talk to us about these cuts to fund defence. The government is saying that 1% should be taken away from lots of different government departments, even more than that from transport and net zero, and given to defence. 6 billion quid is what they want to get there. Also, the Mail on Sunday reporting that the entire fleet of UK attack submarines unfit for war and stuck in the dark, a fresh humiliation for our depleted armed forces, and the fact that the Royal Navy is spending a third of its time on Russian threats. We know that Starmer, Macron and Merz from Germany are discussing today what's happening with Ukraine, and Zelensky is there too. So much to discuss. We'll also talk about middle-class white men banned from public sector internships, and a great event for our forces, the brave men and women who are taking part in the Forces Equine event. We'll check in with them a little bit later on. There's loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. We'll take plenty of calls as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, and of course you can ring me on 0344 499 1000. That number can be used for voice notes, send those through, and indeed for WhatsApps too. So much to discuss here on Talk. Stay with us. Well, Keir Starmer's plan to cut various parts of the government budget is perhaps going ahead. He wants to take money from transport. He wants to take money from infrastructure projects, also things like net zero. And this comes, as I say, in the Mail on Sunday, talking about UK attack subs unfit for war. Sir Liam Fox is the former Defence Secretary and joins me now. Sir Liam, thank you for your time this afternoon. What do you make of this plan? Because it's not just under Labour in the last 2 years that defence has been underfunded, is it?
Well, we've got a specific problem and we have a generic problem. The specific problem relates to this government, and that the government produces defence review. It was very clear from the outset that the Treasury was unwilling to fund the ambitions of the defence review, and there's been this constant battle inside Cabinet and government since then. And it appears that the Prime Minister has not been strong enough to resolve that. It was very clear from George Robertson's review, which I think was a very good review, looking at what Britain required in strategic and equipment terms. But as I said at the time, it was going to hit the same barrier that we always hit, which is that we have got no shortage in the country of ambition or strategy. We have a problem with execution because the Treasury's priorities are not to put national security at the top. And that requires a Prime Minister to say, I'm sorry, the first duty of the government is the protection of the country. And so we have to stand up to these other pressures. Now, if what we're seeing today is a general move away from spending on consumption and welfare and a move to spending on defence, that's welcome. The numbers that I've seen seem very small in comparison to the Ministry of Defence's own estimates of how much the underspend will be over the next decade. But it'll be interesting to see when we're getting genuine statements from ministers and not background briefings, what the numbers actually are going to be. We've had an awful lot of this since the Defence Review came out, that ministers say this, our ambitions are X, and there's been no delivery. And this is caught up, I'm afraid, and I don't mean to be political about it, but caught inside the current government's internecine fighting and the constant threat.
Well, that's certainly a factor, Liam. But this is historic underfunding for long periods. I remember speaking to an advisor to Gordon Brown at one stage. He said that, look, he would give money for the big projects, of course, the huge war effort in Afghanistan and Iraq and so on, but a lot of the maintenance that needed to be done wasn't done. I mean, what does it say when the Chief of Defence Staff has warned Putin is raising the stakes, and we have an entire fleet of UK attack submarines unfit for war and stuck in dock?
Well, I think it brings us to the very core point, doesn't it, Peter, that defence spending is not discretionary. What you spend on education or health or any other projects is dependent upon the amount of money that you have available. What you spend on defence needs to be based on the threat level you face. And when you have to find more money to deal with an increased threat level, that's what you have to do. And of course, you can trim and you can look at your budget if that threat level goes down. But we've now been in a period, really, I think, since about 2008, when there's been an increased threat from Russia. We've seen an increased threat from Iran, an increased threat from China. That has been escalating over recent times. And yet we live in a country where last year we spent more than twice the amount on debt interest as a country than we did on defence.
And 5 times the amount on welfare as well. I just wonder
we're spending 13.3% of our GDP on welfare and under 2.5% on defence. And this is a question for the whole country, and it's not just politicians, which is, are you willing to make the sacrifices required to keep the country safe? Because that will mean that less money gets spent on the health service. It will mean less money gets spent on education. And we have to have a proper brave and frank discussion with the electorate, which says, are you willing to put the country's safety first, or is it your own consumption that comes first? And there are hard choices to be made for a generation that is not used to making hard choices.
It's a very interesting point about those hard choices. In that discussion between Starmer and Zelensky today, we know that Macron and Merz are there as well, talking about the Ukraine conflict. Many will argue that Ukraine is incredibly important, and I don't deny that. But our own defence is something that perhaps should be the priority. I just wonder what you think about that, particularly in the large amount of money we have given Ukraine over the past few years. Would it not be better spent at home? Or maybe this isn't either or?
No, the Ukraine is our defence. The protection of a country, a democratic sovereign nation, invaded by a very aggressive and murderous Putin regime is part of our defence. And we've got to recognise that our collective security is something that we must invest in. So I think that one of the very good things about British politics in recent times is that most politicians, apart from a number of apparently Putin apologists, do believe that giving equipment and training and support to Ukraine is the right thing to do. I absolutely believe that to be true. And I think that the Ukraine has perhaps provided the wake-up call to Europe on defence that American politicians, despite their efforts over the past couple of decades, have been unwilling to do. And I think that when we look at reinforcing the parts of NATO that are vulnerable, particularly the Baltic states, then we do recognise where the threat to Europe comes from. There are global threats from China, from Iran, but the threat to Europe and our immediate security comes from Putin and his increasing disregard for international law or international norms.
What about the threat from Iran, Sir Liam? Because we know that we've had a conviction in the last few days for those two people acting on behalf of Iran. They weren't Iranians, but they were acting on behalf of Iran, who have been convicted of stabbing that Iranian journalist, an anti-regime station, satellite station that he works for in London. I actually hope to interview him in the next few days, perhaps when the sentence has passed. I just wonder about the Iranian threat right here on our streets and how we tackle that. Some of it's cyber, but some of it is very tangible in the sense of the fact that journalists have been stabbed.
Well, I think there are big questions to ask about Iran's influence in the UK, including, I'm afraid, in the media. There are far too many Iranian apologists out there.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I think the media has been found very, very wanting on this particular issue. I agree with you.
We have known that Iranian proxies have been acting in Europe. We've known that there was a potential bomb threat to London from Iranian proxies, and yet it doesn't really appear as you say, in our media, for which there have to be questions asked. But Iran does pose a major risk. They have missiles that are able to target Europe. They've shown that they've been even willing to target their friends in the Gulf. There cannot be any peace in the region or beyond as long as the current Iranian regime are in place. And while they are, we will have to deal with them militarily whenever the threat level reaches a particular threshold. And it cannot be tolerated that Iran, under a regime like this, would develop a nuclear weapon, not only because it threatens its allies and perhaps even further afield and threatens to obliterate and wipe out Israel, but it would trigger a nuclear arms race in the region. And I think that would include Saudi Arabia and Turkey. And I think that's an unthinkable thing for us to be willing to tolerate. And so while there may be disruptions to the global economy, there may be other inconveniences in dealing with the extremists in the Iranian regime, we cannot simply pretend that threat is not there, because dealing with it is uncomfortable.
OK, thank you, Sir Liam Fox, former Defence Secretary for the Conservatives. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch. Jane says, here we go again. How are we going to secure the Ukrainian borders? One day we will secure the borders of the UK. That is the job of the Prime Minister, a very important job. Clay in Folkestone, Kent says, great show, Cardi P. Kevin said the number of crimes reported has gone down because the number of people has gone up. A lot of older people cannot use a computer, so cannot report online, so don't bother. Clay, that's an interesting point, actually, and I disagreed, perhaps too strongly. I disagreed with Kevin that crime is now easier to report. I think it's harder to report. I think a lot of people would just like to lift the phone and instantly speak to a police officer. That's just not what happens with the police and many other forms of communication as well. You're often waiting for a long time. I've reported a number of crimes at various times, one quite serious one actually that took ages to report with Greater Manchester Police, although they were very good and dealt with it well. Mary in County Down says, Kevin is correct. It is well known that the homicide rate is down. Stephen says, I didn't realise you had to be Mr. Memory, according to Kevin, says Steve. Well, listen, I'm very happy to accept that obviously the homicide rate is down, and that point is well made. I suppose I don't have every statistic in front of me. Maybe I could Google it, I suppose, but that's tricky when you're presenting a programme. Thank you to Jane, who says, talking of the World Cup, are England fans allowed to fly any flags, or is it far right now? Do they have to get permission from the Prime Minister these days? It's hard to keep up, says Jane. Well, let's have a look at what the Deputy Prime Minister has been saying in regard to Henry Novak's murder. Lots of people want to talk about that, including Pauline in Lincolnshire. I'll come to in a second, but let's just remind ourselves what David Lammy has been saying to Sky News this morning.
Seeing that footage of Henry Novak at the end of his life was deeply, deeply traumatic. I thought of my own sons around the same age. It brought back memories of George Floyd, of Stephen Lawrence. It was so painful, so harrowing, so horrendous, and my heart goes out to that family for the grace and dignity with which they are now having to conduct their lives.
The Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, speaking to Sky News earlier. Pauline's in Lincolnshire. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Pauline, I understand you're a new caller. I'm delighted that you've lifted the phone. Callers, old or new, are very, very welcome on this station. What would you like to say?
Thank you. Well, it's just regarding that poor young man. Regardless of the rules and guidelines that the police officers obviously have to follow, they showed to me a total lack of compassion for a human being who was obviously in deep distress. I just thought that was really terrible, and I hope they have a conscience about it. They have to live with it for the rest of their days, won't they?
You're absolutely right, Pauline. We know that the Independent Office of Police Conduct is looking into this. One of the 4 officers has resigned, but the other 3 may face consequences. What do you think this kind of says about policing? David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, we heard from him a second ago, he says there's no 2-tier policing in this country. Is he right?
I'm sorry, I have to disagree with him there. I think it's screamingly obvious that everybody gets treated differently. Yeah. But to me, it was just so terrible to see this poor young man, and we showed animals better than that. Yeah. I just was so appalled by it, Peter. I really was.
I think you speak for so many people, Pauline, and thank you for your call. Great first call. Don't make it the last call. Give us a ring anytime. Interesting one, actually. Speaking of police officers. The National Association of Muslim Police, they have a policy paper. We've been talking about that over the last couple of days and their views when it comes to the Israel aspects and Jewish colleagues and so on. And we have a statement actually from the Embassy of Israel that's just come out. This is the Embassy of Israel in the United Kingdom. The reports concerning the National Association of Muslim Police policy paper published by its vice president on their official website, and the inflammatory language the Israelis alleged used in it to demonise Israel, the IDF and Jews, are deeply disturbing. At a time when anti-Semitism is rising across the United Kingdom at unprecedented levels, this is even more concerning, says the Embassy of Israel. Malicious language of this kind risks further fueling hatred and intimidation against Jewish communities. Following the poor management of the situation around Aston Villa and the Maccabi Tel Aviv game, there is a heightened responsibility on the police to ensure that concerns are treated with the seriousness they deserve. We would expect the police and any organisation operating within or alongside policing structures to uphold the highest standards of impartiality, professionalism and protection for all communities. Well, it's interesting that the Deputy Prime Minister says there isn't two-tier policing. I wonder what you think about that, your thoughts on that or any other matter that you want to talk about. Very, very interesting and welcomed. 0344 499 1000. We've been talking a bit about the Makerfield by-election as well, and because of electoral law I'm going to read out the candidates that are standing in that by-election for a final time this show, and then we'll go to a break. Jake Austin is standing for the Liberal Democrats, Count Binface for the Count Binface Party, Andy Burnham for the Labour Party, Dan Clark for the Libertarian Party, John Dyer is an independent, Ed Gemmell for the Climate Party, Paul Gould is an independent, Alan Howling-Lord Hope for the official Monster Raving Loony Party, Robert Kenyon for Reform UK, Robert Pownell for Protect the Wild, Rebecca Shepherd for Restore Britain, Sarah Wakefield for the Green Party, Peter Ward for Rejoin EU and Michael Winstanley for the Conservative Party. Let's hear your views on anything you want to talk about. As I said, the number 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. More calls next.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Sinks, that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk to Michael in Birmingham, who wants to talk about the Zia Yusuf interview. Michael, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hiya, Peter. You might not welcome me after this. I thought you were a little bit hard on Zia there.
Okay.
I kind of thought you picked a few Achilles' heels.
Isn't that the point of an interview?
Well, yeah, but I mean, you know, at least he fronted up, and I would have liked to have seen more, rather than, you know, should the Makerfield person apologise to Carol Vorden, which I don't care about. This condemnation of the violence in Southampton, which I think has been whipped up as a deflection, right? I'd like to see more questioning about, you know, what are Reform going to do now about inequalities against white people?
I did ask that question. I did say, Michael, they can't do anything now, can they? Because they're not in government. But
they can. I mean, you know, look at them. What they did with the local elections. They pushed it a bit by threatening, you know, to take to court the government about cancelling local elections, and that pushed things a bit.
Yeah.
They could do things like where the government department's got racist, anti-white men policies, they could be taking those to court and doing all that sort of thing, even in opposition to getting that sorted out. But going down the wider point, you know, what I would have liked to see, and this isn't your fault. It's nobody's asking this, by the way, right? Would Reform commit to doing a survey of white people who think that they've been on the wrong end of racism? Because I'd never see that question asked. In all my anti-race training in the 150 years I've been working, it's never been from that direction, never.
Okay.
And I think that they might be very surprised at the results you get of that, because I can think of at least 10 times in my career and my life when I've been on the wrong end of either violence or discrimination.
What's happened? Give me one of those 10 times. Tell me what happened, Michael.
Okay, well, attacked, insulted because of my ethnicity, discriminated against with pricing openly. That might not have been in this country, but certainly abroad. And nobody ever seems to take any notice of that. And with all due respect, I don't need David Lammy to be sitting there telling me that white people needn't fear two-tier policing, frankly, because I don't think he's qualified to know what it's like to be a white person.
Do you fear two-tier policing? Do you actually think that this is something that is affecting, or has affected perhaps, your life, Michael?
Yes, and I called this radio station a couple of years ago. It wasn't you that I spoke to. It was another presenter, I won't embarrass by naming, where the Henry Novak situation, I called it out. I said, I live in Birmingham, and I just get the way that people look at me here. I feel looked at here, that I could be walking down the street attacked for no reason, and when the police come, it's turned on me, and I'm the one made the villain because I'm white, even if I was, you know, very badly injured like poor Henry was.
Yeah.
And I felt that for years. This is why I feel so passionate about the Henry Novak case, because I've seen this coming.
Yeah.
Henry is just the tip of the iceberg on this.
Yeah.
You could ask a number of people. There was a contributor on another show earlier on this week, last week while you were away, a guy from London that one of the other presenters had on, and he said, yeah, he feels the same walking through London.
Right.
You know.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's some really interesting points there, Michael, and I want you to feel, and anybody to feel, that if there are points on that you want to make, or you think I should be making these politicians, or your feedback or whatever, just let me know. I'm not sitting here in an ivory tower. I'm you know, yeah, I'm a presenter, but you know, and these interviews obviously have to be done robustly, but I'm really interested in what people think of them as well, and I will take criticism. One person accused me of barking at one of the callers earlier on who was talking about those police statistics. We're of course correct on homicide, and that's all fine. That's okay. You know, I can take it, and do let me know your thoughts on all of that, including your thoughts on the big matters of the day. Dave in Pembrokeshire wants to talk about military spending. Dave, I think you're a new caller. You're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon. Yes, I am a new caller, sir. I'm a very old person, though. I'm an ancient mariner.
I'm sure that's not the case.
I'm 85 this year.
Young at heart, though, Dave. What do you make of what's going on? Because I just feel... Do you know who I feel sorry for? I feel sorry for the people like you, actually, Dave, who've served this country, who are in the Navy, thinking, you know, they're highly trained, really dedicated people, not being paid a huge amount of money to defend our country. And here we are, where their equipment is not up to snuff, and that's not their fault.
No, you've hit the nail on the head there, sir. I joined the Navy in 1958 and I got off the train at Portsmouth Harbour, and the whole of Portsmouth Harbour was a grey mass of warships.
Mm-hmm.
It was awesome. And then I served for 12 years, including a couple of years in the SBS, so I gave a bit of my life away.
You're in the SBS? Really?
Only for a couple of years, sir.
Flippin' heck, I bet you've some stories you'll never tell, but would be fascinating from there.
Well, I shouldn't say it really, but I've just completed a book called Whiskers and Rum.
Oh, right.
Which is my rascally escapades during those 12 years, plus 30 years on the canals and rivers.
I think that'll be fascinating. I do hate it, though, when people shoehorn in references to their book. As the author of Political Animals and Secret Life of Special Advisors, Dave, that it is a pretty shameful behaviour. I think you'd agree.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Well, listen, what would you say, on a serious note, what would you say to the government? How do they deal with it? How do they get a grip of this? Is it just money?
Well, seriously, I woke up this morning and heard on your news that we are now £3 trillion in debt. Let that sink in. So I did a little bit of research, and that's £42,857 owed by every man, woman and child living in the United Kingdom.
Scary.
Central government annual debt interest payable increased by 16.4 billion up until April this year. Let that sink in.
Yeah.
That's so added together. We have left our children and grandchildren over £42,000 of national debt to pay off. Now, that is a catastrophe looming, as our Royal Navy has now 2 aircraft carriers costing £65 billion, each unable to leave port, all our attack submarines broken, unable to operate, and only 1 partially effective frigate limping somewhere around the ocean.
And that's just dreadful for those people who are serving our country, who are trying to do a good job. Dave, we've got to move on, but listen, thanks for your call. I really appreciate it. Just before you go, Dave, 85 years old, but still sharp as a tack, clearly. Give me the name of the book again.
Whiskers and Rum.
Very good. Thank you, Dave in Pembrokeshire there. First call from him, hopefully not the last, because he clearly knows his stuff on a lot of this. Lots to discuss with all of this, including why middle-class white men have been banned from a public sector internship. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who's been in touch. Lots of messages coming in. I'll get to as many of them as I can. If Mastermind found Henry's murder so traumatic, Mastermind referring to David Lammy, Clayton says, so horrendous and so harrowing, why won't he take the knee? Is it because he's a prize hypocrite, among other things? Joanna in Salisbury says, hi, Cardi P. Hi, Joanna. Unbelievable that a police chief attempting to pervert the courts of justice that has an insufficient grasp of what the law is. This is, I think, about the attempt to put a statement out in regard to the Henry Nowak case while it was active, which a lot of people will tell. A first-year law student, a first-year journalism student will tell you that that's not something that should happen. It's like the film of aggressive riot police online using their shields inappropriately, not to mention footage of a group of them selling, one guy sat on a wall. It's like the riot system, unaware they can't be identified by their ID and their shoulders or colours despite their rank. They think they're Teflon because the people they're up against are far right, says Joanna. Terry and Frinton on Sea says, reference those officers involved with Henry Nowak's death. They should be fast-tracked through the courts like Lucy Connolly was and let them defend themselves, but with their own money. As for the police chief, immediate sacking. Adrian from Woking says, please suggest to Zia Yusuf that if reforms state categorically to wind and solar farm owners that their contracts will be renegotiated on that basis, that they will not be paid for electricity not generated, and for the electricity feed to the national grid, they will only be paid the market rate. Another person says, telling that Lammy's first recollection triggered by Henry's stabbing of George Floyd, Stephen Lawrence, not Lee Rigby or the girls of Kirby, colourblind two-tier memory. Another person says it seems to be enough to simply accuse someone of being a racist these days. Jane says so many are talking about Andy Burnham like he has already won and become Prime Minister. Starmer will never leave without a fight, and Burnham isn't as popular as many in the media think. Well, that's a really interesting point, actually, and certainly the Sun on Sunday reporting that Keir Starmer will fight any leadership election that happens. We'll see what happens there, and we'll see what happens with that by-election in Makerfield. It'll be really interesting to see what happens there. But I'm interested to talk about middle-class white men banned from a public sector internship. This is the National Audit Office, which is funded by the taxpayer, let's remember, has said only applicants who are female, of black heritage or from lower socioeconomic groups could apply. Candidates on a 6-week diversity internship in Newcastle will receive a pro rata salary of £25,089 per annum when they start this month. The job advert states that the scheme is designed to support diverse talent in accounting. It is open to penultimate year undergraduates from any degree discipline, but will be focused on those with exposure to financial audit work. Dr. Rakib Hassan, a social policy analyst, is with me now. Rakib, what do you make of this?
Well, I think that it's a very serious problem. And I think that we can obviously talk about divides which continue to persist in modern Britain. I think that class has almost become a dirty word on the left, which has increasingly become obsessed with race and other protected characteristics such as sexual orientation and gender reassignment. But crucially here, it just shows that we are struggling to manage our diversity, our multiracial democracy. And I also believe that when you look at white males more generally, when it comes to what quite toxic ways of thinking, especially under critical race theory, white males are increasingly seen as naturally advantaged. They're naturally privileged. And that's not always the case. So I think that we could definitely have a focus on class-based barriers to social mobility. I think there's a reasonable point to be made there, and I think there is action that ought to be taken. But I think in terms of matters of race, I think that we should be very careful in terms of framing race as a vector of advantage or disadvantage, because some people would actually argue, especially when it comes to matters of law and order, I know that's a bit different to what we're talking about here. If we look at recent cases, actually, there's a growing perception that minorities may well be the beneficiaries of preferential treatment more than anything.
Well, certainly, by all means, give us your view on the Henry Nowak case, because there clearly is a two-tier policing aspect to this. The Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, may deny that that's the case, but I think the evidence just stacks up in favour of that argument. What do you think, Rakib?
No, I think it stacks up higher and higher by the day, Peter. And I think that this case is just the latest example. Hey, we could talk about two-tier justice, two-tier policing. What we have in modern Britain is two-tier governance. I've often made the point that we made significant strides when it's come to matters of racial equality. But I think the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. And I think equality before the law has been increasingly undermined, especially when it comes to, for example, anti-racism guidelines within law and order institutions. And I think there needs to be a very serious debate in terms of how these guidelines ultimately lead to public institutions failing in their most basic of duties, especially when it comes to prioritising matters of public safety and addressing someone who in that particular case was saying that he'd been attacked. But it was saying that, to my understanding, he actually did say the words, "I can't breathe."
Yes, he did, and he also said that he had been stabbed. At which point the police officer says, "I don't think you have, mate."
No, I think that this is a watershed moment, not just in terms of policing, Peter, but also in terms of our race relations and community cohesion. And I think that we do need. I don't think that it's divisive to have this debate on matters of two-tier governance. I'll just give you another example. You can even see it in terms of how the police responds to certain riots. If you look at Hare Hills, if you remember that part of Leeds, where riots took place after children were taken in by social services from a Romani family, the police effectively retreated there. On the other hand, if you remember the Southport riots, you had multiple police forces confronting admittedly violent protesters there. If you look at Prevent increasing, when you look at referrals to Prevent, cases for extreme right-wing outstrip cases for Islamist radicalisation, which is quite incredible.
Okay. Rakib, thank you. That's Dr. Rakib Hassan there, who is a social policy analyst. Let's hear a couple of voice notes, firstly from Glenn on the Novak case, the Henry Novak case.
It's Glenn from Suffolk here. Great show. One thing listening to your panel that struck me, and whilst the police were abject in their failure, awful, I notice a lot of left-leaning commentators are focusing on the police and trying to steer it away from the race element, because this was a vile racist attack against a white person, and it's, you know, just further evidence of incredibly vast amount of two-tier policing in this country now. Have a good day.
Thank you, Glenn. I agree with that. And there are loads of people who just don't think that white people can be victims of racism. They absolutely are and can be, and that is something that happens every single day. Rob's been in touch on Broken Britain.
Good morning, Peter. It's Rob here in Starbridge, mate. Peter, you've asked the question this morning about Britain, is it broken? It's not just broken, it's been shattered into a million pieces. And I think the question we should be asking is not if it's broken, but what actually works in this country anymore. Because nothing does. Nothing. Look at our roads, look at our hospitals, look at our defence, look at our parliament, look at the police, look at the courts. You know, what actually works in this country anymore? Nothing. So it isn't just broken. Like I said, it's shattered into a million pieces.
Rob, listen, thanks for your points there. I want to speak to another Rob in Wrexham, who's a new caller. I understand, Rob, that your son was a victim of knife crime. I'm very sorry to hear that. You're welcome to the programme. Tell us your thoughts.
Hi, Peter. I just felt the need to call in. On Friday, well, it was early hours Saturday morning, my son and his friend were followed, basically, as they were walking to his friend's house just outside Wrexham. They were followed by two Asian guys. Those Asian guys crossed the road, basically, and one confronted the both of them with basically a knife. Slashed at his friend, who was thankfully wearing thick clothing, and then slashed at my son, and which obviously slashed his jean. Now, thankfully, basically, none of them were seriously injured.
Yes.
Weren't injured at all.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, well, absolutely. You know, and that, for me, that is just unheard of where I live. But I think the concerning thing for me really was more about basically my son came in at 4:30, basically quite cut up, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And then basically, you know, I said, right, okay, I think we should report this to the police. And I think this is what really is basically a sad indictment, basically, of the perception of basically law enforcement, is that he said, what's the point?
Right. Yeah.
The two people that basically did this, basically, you know, they wouldn't believe us. They would probably, you know, and what he said, basically, they would cite basically some form of racial abuse, and that, I speak wholeheartedly. I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. They just basically crossed the road and attacked us.
So there was not that there would be any justification, even if there was, but there was no provocation, there was no previous conversation, there was no reason for it.
Nothing whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I think the sad thing is, and this is where we really need to take a look at basically where we're at in our country, is that neither of the boys in question, who were both 19, I might add, felt that they could basically trust the police.
Yeah.
What is the point in reporting it to the police?
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit earlier on in the programme about confidence in the reporting procedure and actually reporting crime, and whether something would actually be done. How is your son now, Rob?
He's fine. He's okay. It shook him up quite a bit.
I'm sure it did.
As you can imagine.
Yes.
It took me 2 or 3 hours, basically. I actually drove into Wrexham with him just so that he walked me the route and what happened and everything.
Yes.
And then I tried to persuade him again, basically, to let's report this to the police. I think we should. But he just didn't want to. So I wasn't going to force it, obviously. So I just wanted to basically, I think it pretty much sums up where we're at, basically.
Well, I really appreciate you giving us a call on that, Rob, and telling us that story, and I wish your son and his friend very, very well. That is really shocking and very worrying as well. Thank you for that, Rob. Appreciate that. Mark's been in touch and says, what's remarkable is that there's no doubt we have two-tier policing, yet a high-profile Labour politician is odds on to be returned to Parliament. Well, we'll see what happens there. Sarah says, how many police hours are wasted on claims of racism? Steve says, barring a few politicians, we have far too many that are just poster boys and girls for the EU. Now they're trying to be everything to everybody, and the reality is communities will end up fighting like rats in a sack. Thank you, Tony Blair. On Peter Murrell, Mick's been in touch and says, of course Murrell did not get special treatment by the Scottish justice system with his legal aid. It was not even cancelled after he sold their villa in Portugal. Mark says, oh sorry, I've just read that out. Cliff in Berkshire, hi Cliff, says, I am taking a break while my wife sleeps. Cliff is a carer, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, for his wife, and Cliff does great work looking after his wife. We've been in touch offline as well. We've had a few emails back and forward. He's a great guy and listens to the show and messages in when he can, which isn't all the time, but I know it's on in the background as he does that brilliant work. And Cliff, it just reminds me, our correspondence reminds me of the marital vows when people say in sickness and in health, and you're absolutely doing the right thing, and it's largely thankless work, and Cliff, I just know that'll be appreciated by so many people. Cliff says, I'm taking a break. I think while my wife sleeps, I think much of the policing problem we have is because we no longer have a local connection. The police houses have been sold off, local police stations are closed, the local copper with the trust of locals have gone, and too far removed from those they police. Very, very good point as well. And it was interesting, the caller earlier on, Kevin, talked about it being easier to report crime. I'm not sure I agree with that, actually. John Roberts in Germany says, I'm just wondering if shoplifting and stealing is now accepted as viewed across the media. If I went to the fridge at number 10 and helped myself to some quinoa hummus and Lord Ali steaks, would the police be called? The UK is cooked. It needs a total rethink of all government departments and public bodies. And a message as well from Betty, who says, Labour and the mainstream media are doing everything to distract. The issue is not race or residency. It is the behaviour and continued failures of police, civil and public services, all under the control of unelected quangos. MPs must do as they are told. Great common sense there. She also says, morning Peter, looking well, says Betty, clearly a woman of great taste. Debbie says, Lammy is a public servant. Why should he be allowed to refuse to go on certain media outlets? It should be in his job description to go on any media outlet that requests an interview. Well, I kind of disagree actually with that, otherwise. I think he should do an interview with us. I think he hasn't been. He's been Deputy Prime Minister for 2 years now. Well, maybe not all that time, but certainly he was Foreign Secretary previously. I don't think he's done, in the 2 years that Labour have been in government, a single interview with Talk. The Prime Minister has. The Prime Minister spoke to me about a year ago. I'm trying to get another interview with him at the moment. Lammy hasn't done an interview. Why is that? Why won't he speak to Talk? I'd love him to have a chat with us. And we do keep asking these things. It's not for want of asking, let me tell you. We're going to talk in just a second. We're going to take more of your calls. We're also going to talk about a really, really good thing. We've had a lot of negativity. We've got a lot of problems in the country, a lot of things that people want to talk about, and I'm delighted that you have. But there's a really good thing, and this is a celebration of sport, of our veterans, of those who serve our country. It's the Forces Equine Games, the exclusive National Equestrian Championships for those who serve our country. We're going to check in with Debbie Heath-French, who is the founder, in just a second, and we'll take more calls right up to 1 o'clock here on Talk. Stay with us.
welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Sinks, that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Jason in the Lake District, who says, watching the interview with Zia Youssef earlier on and comparing the differences between him and David Lammy, it is as stark a contrast as the difference between Stilton and Red Leicester. Yet another reference to that famous mastermind performance, I use the word loosely, by David Lammy. Talking about shoplifting, Nat's been in touch and says, to be fair, chocolate may well be better off inside containers when you're looking about, says Nat. Tad has been in touch and says, I recall Geoffrey Howe going on television armed with a pie chart in order to get the message across that the British economy is finite. Some things have to take precedence over others. The welfare bill has been allowed to get out of control through indolence and political incompetence. Our nation's wealth is now being given away to all and sundry. This has to be put right. There is no alternative, but Labour think it is a never-ending resource. Another person says, would you really love to speak to David Lammy? Yes, I would. Let's hear a voice note from Elisa in Chelmsford.
Picture this. A police officer is standing in the dark on a pavement when she sees a car coming towards her with only one headlight. She cannot see the driver, so she stops the vehicle with the intention of telling the driver that they have a headlight out. Upon stopping the vehicle, the driver immediately says, "You've only stopped me because I'm black." And that's the kind of thing that used to happen to me so often. People would play the race card time and time again. It's really hard when people accuse you of racism for no reason. And that's probably what's happened in Iceland.
Thank you for that, Elisa, and plenty more comments coming in, plenty of calls as well, but I will come to Mal and Bradford in a second. But first I want to speak to Debbie Heath-French. She is the founder of Forces Equine and joins me now. Sorry? Oh, no, she's not ready just yet. We'll come to her in a second, but we'll speak to Mal in Bradford first, who wants to respond to what Rob was saying there a minute ago. Mal, you're very welcome to the programme. 0344 499 1000 is the number you have called. What would you like to say, Mal?
Thanks, Peter. Good afternoon. I was quite concerned listening to Rob, basically because he said he hasn't reported it because he thinks it's a waste of time. I think that's an absolute disastrous, and I can't stress to him and his son to report that. Two reasons.
Well, Rob certainly wants to report it. It's the son who's less enthusiastic.
It needs to be reported. I can't stress the importance, because what you've got in essence, you've got two lunatics going round thinking that they can do this with impunity and nobody's going to touch them because of who they are. But more importantly, they could be saving somebody else in the near future from a far, far worse result.
No, I know what you mean, Mal. Listen, I'm with you, and I think Rob is probably with you as well. Maybe he will persuade his son.
Well, listen, I'm from the old school. I'd take my son by the ears and drag him screaming and kick him into the police station to make sure he's reported. But then again, that'd be done, so yeah.
All right. Mal, listen, thanks.
I wish you a good day.
You too, Mal. Appreciate your thoughts on that. Marvellous. Very good call. Lots of common sense there. We will now talk about the Forces Equine Games, the exclusive National Equestrian Championship for those who serve our country. They've welcomed public servants, serving personnel, veterans and their dependents, along with friends and family of the emergency services, armed forces. The games are going to be featuring all sorts of things to do with horses, dressage, show jumping, arena eventing and all the rest of it. And Debbie Heath-French is the founder of Forces Equine and is with me now. Debbie, tell us what's been going on this weekend.
Well, hi Peter. We're joined at the moment. We're looking very windswept by Mike Downard again, who you've met, and the wonderful Rachel Litterwood, who owns and runs this fabulous venue and has made it so brilliant. We've raised so much money for charity. The guys behind us have had an amazing time, and Mike wants to know where your frilly is.
Rachel, tell us what's been happening this weekend and what your venue allows people to do, because it is so important, especially for veterans, Rachel, to be taking part in all of this.
It's been a fantastic weekend. We've had everything from massage to eventing, championships, and last night up till 9 o'clock we had a fantastic ride and run that we hosted here. This was a charity, really amazing venue. Everyone took part. The teamwork and the atmosphere has just been electric here. At Pickering Grange, it's the first time we've held this, and it's been a fantastic championship. We hope to see you guys again next year. Even bigger, even better. Just been so much fun.
Mike, from your perspective, how important is it not just for veterans but also others who serve our country in uniform? I know you're a firefighter, to actually get in, get stuck in and actually use sport, whether it's horses or horse-related sport or other sport, to actually make their voices heard and to raise awareness of all the issues that are so important with our veterans.
Yeah, it's brilliant. There's been obviously people from police, fire, prison service and such that are here, and it's just seeing them all together talking about mental health, their own struggles and other things is just excellent, and using sport, particularly horses as well, is really good for mental health. So it's just a great time to come together.
Excellent stuff. Well, listen, well done to all three of you. Really appreciate that and wish you very, very well for the rest of the event. That was a little report there from the Forces Equine events, the exclusive National Equestrian Championships for those who serve our country. So there's a really, really good work, and the founder of that we heard from first there was Debbie Heath-French. Lots of messages coming in, including from Nick in Loughborough, who says, why did Peter Murrell do what he did? Simple, power corrupts, and coupled with the entitlement he'll have felt being married to Sturgeon, why would anybody be surprised at such a shameful fall from grace? Another person says, I suppose Sturgeon knows nothing about the villa she visited, no idea about the legal aid, absolutely no idea about anything, including the huge camper van. Unbelievable. She sees no evil, hears no evil, but if, unfortunately she does speak evil. This needs a public inquiry. Anita says, I am 70 years old. I came from Germany 50 years ago. I worked and contributed all my working life. I live now for the last 10 years in social housing. I receive the basic new state pension. I'm worried the way Reform talks about welfare. Do I have to pay nearly £2,000 a year to carry on receiving my pension and stay where I live now? Zarina says, this might be controversial, but can we afford the NHS? This, I believe, is a major source of broken Britain and Britain being badly managed. What are your views? Well, listen, I'm for the NHS. I'm for socialised medicine. I think there are much, much better ways of doing it. And I think that if it was the envy of the world, well, why does no other country do it? Leslie says, can it now be right that after funding Ukraine, they're offering us help with drones? Barbara says, great show as always. How dare David Lammy mention George Floyd's name in the same conversation as Henry Novak? There's no comparison. The man is an idiot, as are the whole of the government. Graham says, as an ex-submariner, I find the decline of our Royal Navy so depressing. Will this country ever learn from history? Pamela in Bolton says, Henry Novak's family are much better people than I am. Grace and dignity would go straight out the window if that was my son. Two-tier policing and two-tier justice. The government are absolutely shambolic and the country is in the toilet. It will take over 10 years to fix, even if we start right this minute, says Pamela. Let's speak to Mark in Bedfordshire about defence spending. You're very welcome to the programme, Mark. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Love the show. It's my second time calling in. I spoke to Julia before with...
OK, well, it's great to talk to you, Mark, for the first time.
Sorry?
It's great to talk to you for the first time on my shows anyway, Mark. What would you like to say?
Well, just listening, and obviously the concern being around many things, but one of them being defence spending. why doesn't, not this government, because I wouldn't do what I'm suggesting if Labour came up with this, but if Tories or Reform kind of roll back the years a little bit. And in the Second World War, I think there were war bonds where people could buy these bonds and redeem them at a certain time.
Yes.
Why can't Reform or the Tories, in their policy, come up with a defence bond whereby people in the country can show that they're patriots and actually give money that they could afford? You know, for me, it might be £500, £1,000. For some, it might be £10, £50, to give us an opportunity to protect ourselves.
And also give it to a specific cause. Well, listen, I know what you mean, and I think when, you know, more and more tax coming out of our accounts, highest level of taxation as a proportion of what the country makes since the Second World War, and as you pay more and more tax, I don't know about you, but I often just think of the fact that, you know, I'm working and there are people who don't work and can work. I'm not talking about people who are disabled or genuinely can't work, or indeed retired people. If you're giving it to a specific thing, if you're saying this is money for defence or money for the NHS or whatever, that is a very different thing, Mark, isn't it?
Absolutely. And as long as you knew it was going on defence to equip our military, to get more military, rather than go on Chagos Islands, you know, if Labour came up with a policy like this, I would not give them the money.
Right, okay. That's to be another government.
The money to Tories or Reform.
Okay.
But surely that's an opportunity, rather than say we're taxing you, and we think, well, hang on a minute, you could reduce the welfare, you could protect our rights a little bit better, you could manage the money better.
Yes.
Why not give people an opportunity to actually say, oh, I'm a patriot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually want to invest.
Very, very interesting, Mark. That is a fascinating idea and a nice, positive, kind of constructive idea on which to end the programme. So I appreciate your call, Mark, and do give me another ring. And just to say that I'm filling in for Alex just this weekend. I know you used to do the slot, but I'm filling in for Alex. Alex will be back next weekend, but I'm back tomorrow night, actually, indeed all week in the 7 till 10 slot, the Evening Exchange, my usual show. So I hope you can join me for that, and perhaps Mark can as well. Maybe give me another ring about something else as well. Mags in Worcestershire says, yes, Britain is broken, and the reason for that is because it's been badly managed for the past few decades. A texter, no name, says, methinks Peter Cardwell was looking for his gotcha moment when interviewing Zia Youssef. He didn't get it. Zia is better than that. I really wasn't. OK, fair enough, you're entitled to your opinion. Mac in Glasgow says the only way to increase spending for our defence is to increase taxes. I think people would be willing to pay a few pence more on their taxes to increase our defence. We have to protect the NHS, and with welfare there needs to be stricter qualifying criteria. Great show, says Mac in Glasgow. I think there's a lot of common sense in that as well. And Paul says, I'm